Oh, the one embarrassing thing I did years ago. What cringe moment keeps you up at night? I went to Dairy Queen with my daughter. She brought along her kitten. The cute girl at the walk-up window asked my daughter what the kitten's name was. Princess, was the response. Smiling and feebly attempting to make conversation, I said, "Today," to indicate that my daughter changed the cat's name frequently. I got a dirty look, and the girl left the window to go make whatever cold treat we had ordered. It wasn't until later, on the walk home, that I realized she thought I was telling her to hurry the hell up and make my order. It still haunts me years later for some reason. Sometimes I'm on the other side where I misunderstand something and give the person a dirty look, only to realize what they really meant later, and then I feel mortified. When I walked down the aisle at my wedding, I was so nervous and focused on not tripping that I didn't acknowledge my dad. I didn't realize this until I saw the video my aunt had made of me. You can see my dad lean in to give me a kiss on the cheek, but I just keep walking. He kind of shrugs and then goes to sit down. It's been 18 years and this still flashes through my head when I'm trying to fall asleep. Also, that time I was trying to get to the school bus and the sidewalk was really icy, so I slipped and fell really hard on my butt. The kids on the bus laughed at me, so I chose to sit there with my head down, wishing I could disappear, while the bus drove away and I walked a mile home. Yes, in the snow, uphill, both ways. 4th grade classroom, we were having a face-off between students who could name the capital of whichever state our teacher named. I'd been on a roll, getting a few correct in a row. Then the teacher says, "Kentucky." With all the enthusiasm and seriousness in the world, I screamed, "Frankfurt!" Everyone was dying laughing except for me at the time. Looking back, it does crack me up that I was so upset about it. I mean, you were pretty much right. You should tell my teacher that, because she said I lost. In 7th grade, a cute girl asked me to sit next to her. I said my mum won't let me sit next to girls. My mother said no such thing. Whoops, well, that's how you become the isolated weird religious kid without being weird or religious. I mean, it's a little bit weird, but it seems more like a temporary flubbing brain toot weird instead of deep ingrained strange. I was in the 4th grade and it was Valentine's Day. I was the new kid in school and this one boy had been picking on me all year. My 10-year-old self was very non-confrontational, so I wrote a paragraph on the back of this nerd's Valentine explaining that I don't like it when he's mean to me and I don't understand why he has to be. He couldn't read my handwriting and brought it to the teacher who made me read it aloud to both of them. I think about that day every day of my life. He even ended up finding me online and contacting me to apologize a few years ago, but all I can think of is the cringe. I was visiting Portland for a wedding that lined up with my birthday as well. We went out to celebrate and finished the night at a karaoke bar. Realizing I'm too drunk to sing, I pick My Name Is by Eminem as my song to perform. Now, there's 2 versions of that song. One is the original release, the other tamed down, which is the one you most commonly hear today. The woman controlling the music put on the original, and off I went. One of the lines at the end is, "Running over lesbians in a spaceship while they're screaming at me, let's just be friends." I finished the song and I'm met by applause from my friends and one other table. The rest of the place is silent and staring. The DJ goes, "Nice job. I don't know if it was the best choice for gay women's night though." At that moment, I wanted to leave my skin. I tried redeeming myself with a wholesome Bill Withers song, but the damage was kinda done by that point. I accidentally mixed up an inside joke with the wrong friend group with disastrous results. Friend number 1. The joke was when someone calls and asks who's all there, and we'd add Daryl to the list of names we were listing off. Daryl wasn't a real person. The joke wasn't funny, as you can tell, and made no sense out of context, but I guess that's why it's an inside joke. Then we have friend group number 2. I was hanging out with them, playing some drinking games. I hadn't seen these guys in a while. It was the kind of get-together to remember a friend that they'd had who had recently died in a car accident. I didn't know him that well, but I was always down to party. Anyway, the phone rings and the person who answered started listing off names. Sorting my cards for another round of presidents and buttholes, I offhandedly said, "Huh, and Daryl." It was the typical record scratch moment where everyone stopped and looked at me. Daryl was the name of the friend they'd had who just died. This happened in 2002, and I still think about it all the time. When I was in the 4th grade, I lived in the middle of nowhere, and there were practically no minorities, just white country people. This Mexican family had just moved in and could barely speak any English, and I befriended one of the kids my age in school. He came over to my place and we were both joking around about his bad English, just doing what kids do. I would pretend to speak with his accent and then hit copy, and it was just silly, stupid, and innocent. My mum told me I was being really inconsiderate and how uncool it was to make fun of someone for not being able to speak English. I felt terrible. The next day at school, my friend came up to me and started joking with me again, but I just shook my head and looked down at my desk in embarrassment. He had no idea what was wrong, and I was too young and dumb to be able to explain my behavior to him. As I grew older, I spent probably 20 years thinking about that day and how much of a little crap I was to be friendly one day, and then without explaining anything just stopping talking to him out of embarrassment. I felt really bad about it for a long time, and often lay awake at night thinking about it. I ended up finding him on Facebook about a year ago, and we friended each other, so I told him how bad I felt and apologized. He just laughed it off and said it was no big deal, and he was still really thankful to find someone as friendly as me when he didn't know anyone here. He said he figured my mum had said something to me about it, and it had never bothered him. I don't know if this was just him being nice to me or not, but it was such a relief to hear. It really felt like a weight had been lifted off me. Well, I have a mixed-up inside joke scenario. It wasn't me though, it was my neighbor. My neighbor is morbidly obese, and my mum is Korean, and they joke with each other about it. My neighbor makes racist comments to my mum, and she makes fun of my neighbor's weight. It's just kind of part of their friendship. They did it in public too, but it was always obvious when they were standing next to each other that it was an inside joke. At one point, my neighbor was out with her husband. They're both white, you see. She was at a checkout counter when she blithely remarked about all the damn Koreans taking over the region. The checkout lady just stares at her. Then the husband leaned over and said, "It's not as funny when Sumi Lee isn't standing next to you." Cue my horrified neighbor, desperately trying to explain that she wasn't racist, that it's an inside joke. "My friend's Korean," which of course just made her look worse. My mum lost it when she heard that story. I was visiting my cousin about 4 months ago, and we didn't have the same greeting handshake. So it was like that really weird thing with your hands where you end up in some super awkward handshake. Last night, I thought about this for like 20 minutes and blamed myself. Why is my brain still shaming me about this? It's so unnecessary. Junior prom, I blurted out during dinner to my date, "Oh, I'm so bored." And I have no idea why that came out of my mouth. I'm pretty well-mannered and quiet. I forget how I tried to play it off, but I felt so bad. I was sitting in a small group of friends in school, and my crush, literally the love of my life at that point, admitted that she liked me. It was the happiest moment of my entire life. So naturally, I said, "Ew," in front of everyone. This was in 2nd grade, and I still think about it weekly. I was talking with a black friend of mine, and we were discussing random haircuts and styles that we'd get if we were other races. I said I wanted that common look, and he thought I meant just, common with a lowercase c, as in low class. I meant Common the rapper, with the shaved head with a nice trimmed-up goatee. It didn't dawn on me until a week later why he gave me that weird look after I said it. He thought I was saying, "That common look that every low-class black guy has." It still makes me twitch every once in a while. Oh god, it hurts. It hurts so much. Oh, literally any other rapper's name and you would have been fine. But that name and that context of conversation. Oh, sweet God, why? For most of my education, I went to public school, and like most kids, I was socially awkward. For high school, I received an academic scholarship to a private Catholic school. It was a really big deal for my family. I didn't know anyone at the new school. Between an odd combination of academics, sports, and the tail end of puberty, I became very popular in this new school. I wasn't used to the attention, and it definitely got to my teenage head. Nearly all of my social circles became around the new school and not with my local friends. In my junior year, I headed to a McDonald's for lunch with a few friends from the new school. Working the counter, I see a girl who I used to go to public school with, that I used to have a crush on. She just lit up when she saw me. She was so excited. And Well, I was a crappy teenager and I just ignored her. I pretended not to recognize her. She looked so deflated when I didn't even acknowledge her. Note that this was the 90s. My family moved a few times after that. I've settled down in a different part of the country after university. I never made it back to that town. And reader, I've relived that butthole moment for years now. Fast forward to one of those nights when I relived it and I decided to look her up on Facebook to apologize. I find out she died 10 years ago in an auto accident. Since I found out her fate, I feel even more awful about that moment. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I made a presentation in my public speaking class in college about how antidepressants were bad and you should just seek other methods of treating depression. This was dumb for a few reasons. First, I just had a bad experience with antidepressants in high school, but apparently I could only see my own perspective. 2, it was just a class to teach public speaking methods and I didn't need to pick such a heavy topic. 3, somehow I was so self-absorbed I couldn't register the weird looks I was getting from people. And when a classmate said, "Well, that was ballsy," to me after class, I didn't understand. And 4, I was a psychology major and I should know better. And I do now, by the way. Anyway, that one stabs at me. I also made a presentation in my sociology class while medicated on the wacky tobacco. It was supposed to be about myself and my relationship to society, and I included a bunch of weird modeling pictures and stuff about my eclectic music taste. Oh, I'm so special I like Missy Elliott and Tom Waits. Is that what this is about? Anyway, I'm going to go bury my head now. When I was in 5th grade, our teacher said a joke in front of class and everyone laughed, including myself. After the laughter died down, a girl looked up at me and said, "You have a really damn disgusting laugh. Ew." I became so self-conscious about laughter since that specific day, and after years I have trouble actually laughing. My brain kind of made it a habit to just smile or slightly chuckle at something, even if it is really funny. Yep, when I was in high school we had to give in feedback forms about our teachers. I was just going to submit mine totally blank, but the teacher in charge at the time told me that I had to write something for every teacher. Stupidly, I decided to be completely honest and to write exactly what I thought of them. It was all nice except for one teacher's, which was just, "Mrs. X is very scary, but she's a good teacher." And I meant both of those things, but it didn't matter. Well, the teacher was seriously hurt by it, although she pretended it was no big deal at first. Then, as the weeks went by, she'd mention it once a week, gradually seeming more and more upset, until one day when another student mentioned being scared to ask her about something, she shouted at him for an entire period. She also mentioned me a bunch, saying she'd never forget what I said but could forgive me. Anyway, she was the kind of teacher to really consider her students to be her own kids, and I guess me being scared of her hurt her. I do regret that. When I was 11, it was my first day at a new school, and all the other students were also new. The maths teacher started our first class by asking us each about our education background, what school we came from, what they taught us in our last year's math class, just trying to get a general idea of what kind of students he was dealing with. The thing is, I was so nervous that I spaced out for a bit and I got lost in my overthinking mind, so I didn't hear the teacher's questions to my classmates. When I got to my turn, the teacher just said, "Now tell me about you." Assuming I understood what kind of information he was expecting, I just went straight into a monologue that started with, "So I was born in the south zone of the city, but my mum decided to move to our current neighborhood a few months after divorcing my dad," and went on, giving some very specific details about my short life. Everyone had a really confused look on their faces, and as soon as I realized the teacher was also completely lost, I stopped talking and went instantly red. The teacher then said, "That's all really great, but I was only really interested in what happened last year, not the last 10, and everybody started laughing. Next day, nobody remembered it anymore, but 12 years later, it still comes to mind in pretty random moments. Bro, I can't even begin to pinpoint one event. I guess one thing is when I was 11, I asked my teacher if I could go to the bathroom 3 times during class and got told no each time. And well, sure enough, I couldn't hold it any longer, and there's bullying for the next 6 months. Literally shakes me in bed about how I'd never felt that low before. Somehow, I managed to live through it. I mean, we've all got flaws. Mine is a bladder that empties prematurely. Freshman year of high school, it was one of those days before school starts, and you meet your teacher and your parents are there. My teacher was handing me a piece of paper and I didn't see the paper, so I shook his hand. He said, "Oh," and my mum said, and I panicked and said, "I just wanted to be polite." So I still want to die when I think of that. This is the most relatable one. Here we have it. Social cue miss, improper reaction, and panicked excuse. And years of guilt for something the others almost certainly didn't think of again afterwards. I went through a phase where I scolded people for reading Harry Potter because my parents told me it was evil. Lots of awkward situations because of that. Back in 2006, during my 7th grade, I just started watching more anime on Toonami, and I was really into it. One day we had to do a paper describing ourselves coming back from summer break, and the class had to put a person to a description. I named my favorite jacket that I wore every day Takashi, for F knows why, and the cutest new girl in my class read my description out loud, and in it I described my love for my jacket and how I had named it what it was. The girl looks weirded out, stares at the class and goes, "What weirdo names their jacket?" Once no one guessed who it was, I piped up and said, "Well, maybe they aren't here today," trying to cover myself. My dumb idiot self thought that this was an in-class assignment, and the teacher said, "No, it had to have been written by someone here." Finally, one of my friends goes, "Hey, my name? Aren't you like the only one in class who plays soccer?" which was also in my description. I sunk in my seat as we moved on to the next description. I wake up sweating, feeling that jacket still on my shoulders to this day. Last year, I saw a 4-year-old kid with his father, and the kid wants to go to X place, but the father wants to go home. So the kid was crying and slowly running to X place, and the father was calling him to return now, and dumb me said to the father, "If you want, I'll go get him for you." And there was a woman laughing at that, and the father with a what the frick face said, "No thanks." In primary school, this girl really looked like my friend from the back. I went up to her, tapped her on the shoulder, said hi, and then played it off like I didn't just mistake her for someone else and I left. That was probably, I'm going to say, 23 years ago now. When I was 6, my teacher asked us what's our parents' occupation. I said my mum does the dishes, and after 5 minutes of explaining what she does at home, my father just took it as my mum is a housewife. My mum is a chemistry teacher, and I told her that I said that when I was 12. You really can't blame me. I didn't really think about where my mum went during her work hours. I just knew she went somewhere and just kept playing with my toy cars, which I stole from my brother. In 8th grade, I tooted once, and a few minutes later, someone smelled it and asked who did it. They asked if it was me, and I just started crying. I used to be very sensitive, and so I thought they were accusing me and felt really bad, so I cried. It's partially because of that I'm now much less emotional and tend to keep my emotions bottled up. A couple of years ago, when I was at the drive-up window at my bank, when the transaction was finished, I started to raise my hand to wave goodbye to the teller, but instead of waving, I started to flip him off. It happened completely subconsciously. I don't think I was able to stop in time because he had a shocked look on his face. I eventually apologized, but I still feel horrible shame over it. Every time I see him, the shame comes back. Plus, I now have a crush on him. I was around 15 and having a complete breakdown on all aspects of my life. My mother had passed away suddenly. I had a rampant, untreated mental illness and was not being kind to myself for years, and nobody was listening. My dad was understandably a wreck, and school fell to the wayside. I was barely going and was intending on dropping out. I couldn't do anything, let alone it all. There was a high school dance. I was desperate to have some fun and pretty much have this be the highlight before I left, though I failed at communicating this. I really wanted a friend to dance with me and our other friends. She was awkwardly sitting alone. I pushed her too hard and made her cry. I couldn't see through my own bullcrap to see how bad of a position I put her in. All I could see was my world collapsing. We never spoke again. She went from my best friend to nothing in one night. That was 15 years ago, and I still feel awful. Hindsight is always 20/20, as they say. Oh, I had some mean girl moments growing up that I deeply, deeply regret as an adult. My dealer came over to my apartment and tried to give me a handshake that involved a fist pound and other not-so-complicated gestures. I totally fumbled it, and he said, "Oh man, just hold up and let's try that again." So he tried again, and I fumbled again. He just sighed, sold me some green herb, and left. I've never felt so white. I ended up getting a new dealer because I was so embarrassed. I was in 5th grade or so, and I was sitting in class with a couple of classmates. We were talking about Weird Al songs we liked, and this one girl asked, "Have you heard of Pokerama?" And I followed with, "Have you ever heard of I'm So Sick of You?" Which I guess they hadn't heard because she looked immediately down at her desk, sort of sad looking, and the guy next to her did a little ho-ho, as if I'd made a nice burn. I guess they thought I was telling this girl I was so sick of her. I had no clue at the time though, so I just let it ride. Oh, I still feel bad about that one. You know, I often lie in bed thinking about an obnoxious thing from grade 9 that I wrote in someone's school yearbook. I'm 38 years old. I was 8 and I was at church in the kids' service, and they always picked a kid to participate and they'd usually get a prize after. That day they chose by asking us why we should get to go up, and I literally said, "My aunt works here, so I deserve it." I was an entitled little brat. Every time I remember that, I die a little inside. I was discussing a recent surgery I'd had at work to a bunch of people, including a lady with spina bifida who lives in a wheelchair. I specifically was talking about how annoyed I was by not being able to walk for 3 weeks. I revisit that moment a lot. Marriage secrets exposed. What these husbands do that makes them absolute keepers. Kindness under stress beats butterflies in your stomach. Choose the partner who listens, apologizes without excuses, and shares in the not-so-raunchy stuff like chores and budgets. Quiet, daily respect ends up feeling like real romance. Mine has made a few grand gestures in his time, but the most special to me is that he always fills my water bottle with icy water just how I like it right before I get home, so it's waiting for me. We got married before either of us could afford nice jewelry, so I still have my plain silver engagement ring, but every ice cube in that bottle is like a 20-carat VVS diamond to me. Loves me unconditionally, cleans around the house, supports everything I've ever done, looks at me as if I created the sun, spends as much time with me as possible, figures out what I need before I do, talks to me and about me as if I'm the greatest person he's ever met in his life, makes me laugh, still makes me blush after nearly 10 years, can still give me goosebumps and makes me smile when I'm crying. It's a lot of things. Some of them are small and some of them are large, but he's always been there and I can't imagine going through the rest of this life with anyone else. We have been having an absolutely terrible month, with a layoff and a parent being deathly sick amongst other tragic happenings. So all of the responses people sent to this absolutely made our day. I hope all of you find the kind of love in your lives that you deserve. Veteran husband and father here. Helping around the house and helping out as much as you can is the kind and caring thing to do. It amazes me that men don't realize that it also leads to more time spent together. He's so ferociously on my side no matter what. He makes me laugh until my stomach hurts, but he's also so kind and helpful to those around him. We were at a wedding a few years back, and while walking into the reception area, one of the waiters dropped an entire cart of plates that shattered everywhere. Everyone walked right past or just around the guy. Not my husband, though. He stopped and helped that man pick up every single plate. He does things like this often, and every time I'm reminded how incredibly lucky I am. Does it ever get to the point where it's annoying? Don't get me wrong, he sounds like a wonderful person, but I'm just imagining just wanting to go to the grocery store and having to stop for the 3rd time in half an hour because another old woman needs to be helped across the road. Just let her cross by herself, Darren. The kids need dinner. I've been sick for the last week, and he has spoon-fed me soup and ice cream when I was too dizzy to do it myself. I love flowers, but I love them outside so they don't die as fast. He landscaped every inch of our property and added planters so I could have as many flowers as I want. He's grown plants from a cutting so that I could have them. I came into the marriage with an elderly cat. When the cat was dying, he'd intermittently get diarrhea and need baths. My husband would get up in the middle of the night and bathe the cat so I could rest for work. He slept on the floor with the cat in the cat's final days. When we met, he said he didn't really like cats. He loves to cook. I can't tell you the last time I cooked dinner. I'll do the dishes, I'll scrub a toilet, but I hate cooking. He'll cook anything with a smile. He knows my parents, who live with us, don't tolerate spicy food. Sometimes he cooks 2 different dinners so we can have something spicy and they won't. My parents live with us and he tolerates everything that comes with that. When they're injured, he'll help out with everything, from assembling crutches to getting medication to helping in the bathroom. He handles it all with tact, grace, patience, and empathy. He even helps the elderly neighbors when they're in need. Taking care of me? Yeah, that's nice. Take care of my elderly cat? Oh baby, that's the man. I entered my relationship with an elderly hedgehog. They usually live about 5 years, give or take. Mine lived to more than 8 years old. When my little guy passed, I was beside myself. I called my man sobbing while he was at work. He came home immediately and wrapped up his little body for me. I just couldn't. Drove me an hour away to my mom's property, because I lived in an apartment at the time, and he dug the hole himself. My mom's yard is 90% gravel and 10% soil, so that was a tough job. He didn't complain once. Let me sit and cry over his little grave as long as I needed. Then he drove us home. That's when I was 100% sure I picked the right man. It's really nice to see these kinds of questions and these kinds of responses. It's a tough world out there. I'm glad that some folks are happy. When the kids were babies, my husband used to come home from work, take over care of the kids, and told me to go out for an hour just for me. I'd go to Target or to the mall and just walk around to de-stress from being at home all day with the kids. I didn't know anyone else whose husbands did that, and I felt really loved knowing that he was thinking of me and how stressful my days at home were. That 5 hours a week to myself really helped keep me sane when the kids were little. Takes amazing care of our kid. Great dad. Spends a lot of time with him. He dotes on me. He'll bring me stuff from the kitchen when I'm feeling lazy. Listens to me. Cares about my feelings. Makes me happy in the bedroom like it's his job. And he laughs at my jokes. What more could I want? I'm truly so lucky. Same. Guys, notice there's nothing here about expensive gifts. I mean, those are nice, but without the above list, they're hollow. My husband ruined my favorite sweater by leaving it in the washer overnight, and the dyes bled. When he saw how upset I was, he didn't try to invalidate my feelings or get defensive. He just apologized and got me a replacement sweater. I've never had to feel worried that my emotions would make my partner resent me. He just honestly listens and repairs things. Every time I turned the shower on, he'd immediately go and pop a towel and fresh clothes in the dryer and listen for me to turn the shower off and bring me a warm towel and clothes to change into. He died 8 years ago, and I still cry getting in and out of the shower. I can't believe I'm going to tell this story, but here I go. It was just this one thing my husband did. We lost our dog to cancer about 6 months before we listed our house for sale. This dog was my soul dog, and I couldn't bear to leave her at our old house. My husband and brother-in-law dug her up. She was buried in heavy canvas and probably plastic-lined in a burial bag, placed her in a large tote, put her on a trailer, and drove the hour to our new house. Then they dug a grave in the prettiest spot up on a hill and reburied her. We've been married for 27 years, and he's been an amazing husband and dad, but this was the moment I knew I'd really won the husband and in-law lottery. I joke around with my daughters that when it comes to husbands, they need to find the man who's willing to dig up their dead dog. He patiently listens to me blather on about the weirdest crap even after 12 years of me blathering on about the weirdest crap. He's willing to be silly. He treats me as an equal partner. He loves the pets as much as I do, and he's of the highest moral fiber. No, we're not religious. He also has extremely high fiscal literacy, which takes the weight of financial anxiety off my shoulders. He brings me coffee in bed every morning. Well, actually, he should really bring it in a mug instead. That's much more practical. He cooks, does the dishes and grocery shopping, and the amount he's helped me postpartum is incredible. I've read stories of men not helping with injuries after birth, and mine helped me like it was nothing. He took care of my stitches and cleaned my bloody laundry without batting an eye. Okay, maybe marriage isn't so bad. I just needed to see this today because social media feeds on the negatives of marriage and cheating men too much when these are women's thoughts about their husbands. We need to normalize seeing this side of marriage. It's worth noting that happy women aren't as interested in spending time on social media bragging about it, as compared to unhappy women trying to spew hate. There are tons of women happily married to great men, but social media will have you believe it's a rare minority and that all men are trash. While I agree that it's nice to see the positive side, and that's why I wanted to use this topic, I do have to say that writing off all people with complaints as just wanting to spew hate and discredit all men is a bit of a jump. People who complain about cheating partners are generally angry at their partners, not advocating to chemically neuter an entire gender. There are just a few extremes in men and women who take their disillusionment with an entire gender to the next level. I have to echo that lady earlier who talked about how great her partner was postpartum. The amount of bloody stuff and bandages my husband has dealt with, like a champ, it just leaves me speechless. After COVID, I coughed so hard and so long, literally for over a year, that my lungs were separating from my ribs and I had basically zero bladder control. I remember crying in the bathroom because every time I coughed, I wet my pants, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. He asked what I needed, and I told him I needed diapers. I was sobbing, so ashamed and embarrassed and exhausted. He asked me what size and if I had a brand preference, and I just sobbed that I had no idea. I'd never used them before. He put me in the shower and went to the store and came back with a package and a box of my favorite ice cream bars. He never brought it up again. Just last month we were on vacation and my period arrived unexpectedly. He left me to take a nap and just went to the corner shop to get me tampons and again returned with my favorite ice cream bar. He's been rock solid through 2 surgeries, long-term illness, and a cancer scare, never complaining or being grossed out, just a calming presence and asking me what I need. It's just clear that he adores me, and I adore him too. My husband slept on the floor next to our son's crib for the first 10 months of his life, doing all of the night feeds. I was a stay-at-home mum, and he had to get up and go to work every day. I wasn't healing well physically or mentally from a traumatic birth, but he really showed up for us. I'll never forget his kindness when I was at my most vulnerable. Both our son and I think he hung the moon. I just read a book called Lucky by a British celebrity. I finished it last night. It's basically a journey through her traumatic birth experience, and good God, what some women have to go through with birth is horrific. You just reminded me of it. Her partner seems really great too. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My husband is the absolute sweetest thing. Every day when he gets home from work, we do our 1-minute hug to get the oxytocin flowing. I can feel my breathing and heartbeat slow down. Big sigh. You're home. All is right with my world. Then we take a bath together. When I lie back to wet my hair, he massages my face and leans down periodically to give me an upside-down kiss. A face massage is the most exquisite thing. It makes me feel treasured. He helps me get the soap and conditioner out of my hair and massages my neck and shoulders at the same time. His touch is the most amazing thing. I've been in relationships in the past where the only time my partner ever touched me was when he wanted to do the deed. Under those circumstances, it was hard to enjoy it because I felt pressure. This is so different. We touch each other all day long. I always feel as if I have all the time in the world to enjoy something because he genuinely enjoys making me feel good. This man will play with my hair for an hour. It's not just a means to an end. If it heats up, great. If not, that's okay too. It's a funny thing though. The freedom to say no without having to deal with any sulking makes it so much easier for me to want to say yes. We do the deed more than a lot of couples decades younger. I'm menopausal, but my desire has yet to fade. It's like an upward spiral. He makes me so happy that I'm always looking for ways to make him happy. We're both so grateful for each other that we're always thinking of little ways to surprise each other. He's honestly never mean to me. His voice always sounds so happy when he answers the phone, no matter what kind of day he's having. We never get crappy with each other. Never ever. It's never me against him or him against me. It's us against the problem. He expresses appreciation for things that I do. He brags about me to other people. He's done all kinds of things for my grown children that he surely didn't have to. He does his share around the house without me having to nag or write him a list. He's patient when my mental or physical health isn't the best, and he encourages me to do the things I love. He makes me laugh. My husband is the best person I've ever known. The only thing I regret is not marrying him sooner. The only thing I fear is losing him. Forever won't be long enough to love him. Silly answer. He'll always chop the onions for me so I don't have to cry the whole way through. And serious answer, he treats me as a full human being and equal partner in a culture which increasingly seems to not want to do so. Also, we're in our 50s now, but we've known each other since freshman year of high school. If something ever happens to him, ye gods forbid, I'd never be able to replicate the sheer amount of shared history and in-jokes that we have with another future partner. This man knows and accepts every part of me, good or bad. He's kind. He's a model husband and father. He's interesting and has hobbies of his own. He makes sure I'm happy. He cares. I love that man like nobody can. He moves mountains, then pounds them to ground again. When it comes to household maintenance and chores, he doesn't believe in gender roles and he just does half, without me asking. Does chores when he notices they need to be done too. Treats me with respect and doesn't whine or argue if I'm not in the mood for romance. Instead, he'll say something like, well, you're hot and I'm going to think about you while I take care of myself. Which sometimes, like if I'm just a little too tired, is enough to change my mind. Listens to me and changes his behavior when I tell him something's bothering me. Like he grew up in a pretty unaffectionate household with no praise, so I had to tell him, hey, I could use a little bit of compliments once in a while. And it took him a while to get comfortable doing that, but he put in the effort even when it made him feel awkward. We have a lot of similar but not quite the same hobbies, and he makes it easy for me to do his hobbies with him, if that makes sense. Like he loves going on long bike rides, but he knows I hate and struggle with cardio. So when I told him I was thinking about getting an e-bike to commute, he got super excited and did a bunch of research and helped me pick one out, and got me a backup battery so I could do long trips with him effortlessly. He pushes me to grow and calls me out, gently and in private, if I'm being crappy. I mean, so many things. He makes me feel cared about, respected, listened to, and beautiful every day. Having a partner with a good way of effectively confronting you on your problematic behavior from time to time without making you feel like crap is a real win. Coming out of those feelings like you've learned something about yourself or your partner is a sign that it's being done right. You will rub or massage my ache or sore muscle that I have any time of day, and there's no racy remarks that come with it. 4th time pregnant currently, and I have him rubbing my lower back every day. Never a complaint, always seems happy to assist in any kind of relief he can bring to me. I am so appreciative. So, I'm a sleepy gal, and I usually go to bed early, way earlier than my husband, who's a night owl. Earlier this summer, I woke up on a Saturday and walked past our teenage son's room. It was oddly cleaner than it had been the day before. I realized it was spotless, like sanitized, and my son is not in his bed. I find my son asleep on the couch in a cozy pallet, and I see the dreaded tiny trash can beside him. Turns out my son caught the stomach flu and rained the contents of his stomach over the side of his loft bed at 1 a.m., basically drenching every square inch of his bedroom in vom. He ended up throwing up all over the hallway and the bathroom too. Besides my kid sleeping in another location with a bucket beside him though, I would have never known what happened. That's how well the house had been cleaned. My husband patiently tended to our sick kid for hours and then sanitized half the house while I blissfully slept, completely unaware of the chaos and mess. And in the morning, he was just like, no biggie. No resentment or irritation towards me for not waking up, just concern for our guy. And that's just who he is. All in, hands-on, so nurturing and selfless and so loving. I have a million stories or examples that would prove how lucky I am, but this one really made me stop and appreciate what an amazing partner he is. I'm so happy for all of you. You all truly deserve this happiness. I'm heartbroken for the women reading these with tears in their eyes. Believe me, I feel ya. He's interested in the things I care about, not to the point where he'll take on those things as his own hobbies, but enough to remember the storyline or characters or tropes. He's currently dressed as Booth in a suit because I'm dressed as Bones for a convention. Short version, he likes me, as a friend, so he's nice to me. He adores our kids. He bought all of their back-to-school stuff, uniforms, new shoes, and school bags, with no input from me. He has his crap together and makes us dinner. Makes me laugh, he's getting hotter even after 15 years together. Supports me in my career, I ran up the aisle when we married and I'd do it again. After I had the baby, he did all of the night shifts because we were trying to fight my postpartum and sleeping helped me. He encouraged me to go back to school and put all of his dreams on hold until I finished and started my career in engineering. He brags about me to everyone, his students, fellow co-workers, family, and friends. He's my biggest cheerleader, hands down. He's such a good dad. When our daughter came out to us as trans, he spoke at every single school board meeting as they attempted to strip away her rights. He'd spent long days driving back and forth to our state capital to speak at committee meetings over anti-trans bills. He went to rallies, and he wasn't just doing it for our kid, but for all of his students as well. He rubs my back almost every single night, and he cooks me my favorite meals when I ask. He's the one that picks up the dog doo in the backyard. As a man and husband, I'm both reassured and slightly depressed at how basic a lot of these answers are. You know, it's the small things that mean the most after all. If you're a bad partner 80% of the time, a spontaneous trip to Disneyland isn't going to fix that, you know? People want to feel safe and know that you have their back when they need it. I am desperately in love with my husband. Here's just a few of the many wonderful things about him. He supports every single hobby I have without fail. He built me a huge garden, hung shelves, thrifted a sewing machine, went back to used bookstores. If I love it, he's pumped about it. He often shows up at the house or my workplace with coffee, flowers, or candy, and also brings things for my friends and co-workers as well. For no reason, just because it's Tuesday. He gives me back and foot rubs without me asking. It took me a long time to believe that he genuinely just enjoys touching me and making me feel great. He literally will not leave the room without kissing me and saying he loves me, just in case. When we disagree, he shares his feelings openly, and we communicate about the problem. I'm a survivor of a pretty unsafe childhood, and I have a lot of trauma around men yelling at me, or talking down to me amongst other stuff. My husband would never raise his voice or hand to me, and he makes me feel safe. Truly a kind soul with no dark baggage to work through. He makes me feel like the light of his life, just like he is mine. I have bipolar disorder, ADHD, and some other neuro stuff going on. He's quite neurotypical. Whenever I get hyper-focused or depressed or manic, he just toughs it out. I am messy, but I don't mean to be, and he's very patient with me. He helps me come up with a cleaning schedule that we tackle together. He knows me so well, my quirks, my habits, how I think, and it's truly the greatest expression of love I've ever seen. He will say that I'm a chaos goblin and call me perfect in the same sentence. He's literally the glue that holds me together. 1. Does the grocery shopping, cooks, and cleans the kitchen every day. 2. Moisturizes my skin after I take a shower. 3. Rubs my feet every night. And 4. Compliments me and gives me lots of cuddles. When I was diagnosed with stage 4 chest cancer, he cried so much that the doctor had to console him, And he's just been doing everything for me ever since and reminding me of how important I am and how strong I am while going through treatment. I've talked to lots of women whose husbands treated them like crap after diagnosis, including cheating on them. So many tiny things that add up to a wonderful partner. He always gives me a kiss goodnight, makes coffee on mornings that I sleep in, hides my favorite candy in spots that I'll find it when he's out of town, and unfailingly asks me if I need anything when he's headed to the grocery store. He's so loving with our cats, he listens to me when I need to talk something out, he's down to try weird stuff with me like sensory deprivation chambers, he takes a day off on my days off so that we can walk on the beach, and is an amazing cook. He's so funny and will egg on my terrible humor, and he does this thing where he cracks my middle toe every day. Trump vs. Hillary. How different would America be if she had won? Well, the Supreme Court would not be the joke that it's become, and would still have Roe v. Wade. Was it perfect? No. Was it an F-ton better than what we have now? Yes. One thing people haven't mentioned so much about a more liberal Supreme Court is that gerrymandering would have been banned. Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in 2019 in Rucho v. Common Cause that partisan gerrymandering was fine. Just one more liberal justice would have made partisan gerrymandering illegal nationwide. Whether Clinton in 2016 or Gore in 2000, the country could have been very different with more healthcare reform and access expansion, a SCOTUS liberal majority, significant climate policies, as well as a major public health response to COVID, instead of responding with deadly denial followed by suggesting to shove a light bulb where the sun don't shine or inject some bleach. I don't care if I like the person in charge, but I care very much that they're fully competent to do the job and that they conduct themselves like an adult instead of a vengeful, grifting, criminal child. If Hillary had won, I wouldn't have realized how awful some of my family members and friends were. Truly no morals or values, just pure tribal GOP no matter what. There's lots of people with rose-colored glasses here. The biggest thing is the Supreme Court would be liberal. Everyone's talking about Roe, but flipping Scalia's seat could have meant chipping away at Citizens United. None of the Trump-related decisions that greatly expand presidential power. None of the deregulation decisions. We'd still have Chevron, maybe chip away at Shelby. Donald J. Trump would probably have gone to prison instead of using the presidency to hide from his crimes, and he'd have been prosecuted. Project 2025 would have never left the drawing board. Things would just be better. Her debate with Trump, she had detailed plans, costs, where the money was coming from. I have a Vote Hillary pin still. She wouldn't have been perfect, but definitely better than this. We'd still have serious systemic issues surrounding wealth inequality, but nonetheless significantly better than the reality today. Yep, we in the outside world would probably all still grumble and complain about the US, and those in charge there would probably still just make a bunch of flashy hand waves that never truly affected real change, but we likely wouldn't have had people blatantly trying to create a fascist state, so we'd be winning there. She may not have been world-changing, but she would have been stable and boring, and we'd all be fine. The far right would still be fringe, not an emboldened mainstream audience to target. Right-wing media would have had nothing too crazy to push. Rather than pushing legitimately dangerous ideas popularized by the administration, they'd be focused on the same completely harmless bullcrap as before. Fox would be covering the equivalent of the tan suit and Dijon mustard incident, and pretending they were apocalyptic because there'd be nothing of true import to scare their viewers. The best part of Obama and Biden is I rarely thought of them or heard from them. Meanwhile, the orangutan in the Oval Office is constantly intruding on all our lives. I can think of two things. First, we would still be in Afghanistan, or we would have left in a considerably different way. And second, Republicans would win the presidency in 2020. It would be a lot easier for swing voters to blame the Dems for the restrictions on personal liberty during COVID if a Democrat were in the White House in 2020. I agree with that second point. Hillary would have been seen as a continuation of the Obama years, similar to HW with Reagan. COVID would have been the decision-maker and handed the Republicans the presidency, maybe even Trump for a rematch. On the plus side, Trump would have been saddled with the inflation aftermath and there probably wouldn't have been a Jan 6. It would have been way better, and I'm not even a Hillary stan. In fact, I very much dislike her, but she would have been much, much, much better. Almost any of the candidates on either side would have been better than Trump. Even Jeb frickin' Bush was our last hope for a semi-sane candidate, until he primaried out to Trump. The dollar wouldn't be devalued 11%, soft power would still exist, tariff taxes wouldn't be hitting us all, cancer research and disease prevention would still exist, science and innovation would still be funded, books and art wouldn't be banned, and there'd be no kidnapping and detention of US citizens underway right now. And that's just the short list. Democrat voters were too busy tearing themselves apart claiming Sanders was cheated and making Clinton out to be an evil human being that was nowhere close to the reality, while Republican voters were coalescing around Trump. Many young voters don't understand the concept of perfect is the enemy of good, and they like to adhere to an ideological purity test, and as a result end up with a result far worse than the alternatives. In the meantime, I've had older Trump voters tell me that they dislike him as a person, but believe the policies he'll enact are far more important than him as a man. This is a far more pragmatic approach to voting than whether you like the person's personality or not. Well, for starters, that guy with the island that both Clinton and Trump were on would have been killed while in prison. Oh, wait. Nothing special. COVID would have ended much more quickly. No January 6th. Some poor people would still have healthcare. America wouldn't be a laughingstock. We'd be, say, 25 trillion in debt instead of 37 trillion. US aid would still exist. We wouldn't be on the verge of recession. HHS wouldn't be run by people who believe in crystals and essential oils as cures for cancer. Roe v. Wade would still exist. Our international trading system wouldn't be a cluster F. There wouldn't be tanks on the streets of DC. We wouldn't have masked secret police pulling people off the streets and into unmarked vans. We'd still be part of the Paris Climate Accord. COVID might literally not have happened under Clinton. Trump cut 2/3 of the US CDC staff in Wuhan before COVID even broke out. Having those extra experts in place might have made the difference in the initial detection and containment, and the virus might not have spread beyond a few people. She would have been impeached for allowing 17 whole people to die during the COVID crisis. I think things would be less different than people think. A lot of people here are being extremely idealistic about how her term would have gone. Relations with Iran, in my opinion, would be the big divergence, as I doubt Hillary would have ordered the strike on the Soleimani. Trump would maintain support after the election of 2016. A lot of people think just because he lost means he'd lose support. Like him or not, no other Republican candidate has been able to get voters behind him the way he has. A lot of people, even conservatives, expected him to lose in 2016. Him losing by such a narrow margin would enable him to stir more support. People are talking about Hillary's response to COVID like it matters for the 2020 election. Here's the truth. The incumbent in 2020 was always likely to lose. COVID happens so close to the election that the positives of whatever she might have enacted wouldn't have yet come to fruition, and the negative effects of COVID, like mask mandates, distancing, economic hits and stuff, are really hard to shrug off. Those are some really easy things for Trump to work off of platforming-wise to rile up support. Trump would win in 2020, meaning he'd be the president in office when the vaccines hit, and he'd likely win in 2024 as the Dems struggle to platform someone. I believe it would possibly be a much slower, more normal progression towards what we're seeing now, but overall what we considered normal pre-2017. Overall, definitely much better. Until we tackle universal gerrymandering laws that fairly represent everyone, until Americans realize social programs help everyone, until monopolies aren't the apex of capitalism, and until corporations aren't people and others I haven't even mentioned, our outlook looks grim regardless of who sits in the seat. But we'd be less far along the line of destruction with someone else in charge. I think we'd probably still be complaining, but with no concept of how bad things could really get. We know now. Millions who are dead today would not have died from COVID. The soldiers who died as a result of the pullout would never have happened because Hillary wouldn't have been stupid enough to free those hostages in the first place. Medicare for all would be here right now, as would free universal community college or trade schools. Power stations for electric vehicles at every rest area on interstates. After 8 years of Hillary and the prosperity gained from having Democrats in control of Congress, our economy would be in the strongest position it's ever been. We'd now have a Democrat president, and Republicans would be struggling to figure out how to gerrymander their states to secure more wins, just as they're doing right now. Yeah, this take is about as idealistic as it gets. As the few comments before pointed out, we don't tend to notice things going well for us when they're more or less just fine. And unless Clinton completely evades the pandemic somehow, the incumbent party probably is going to have a very tough time there. I'd love for the states to have experienced as much positive change as this last commenter wrote about. I just don't see it happening, even under the best Democratic candidate. We'd have a vastly different Supreme Court and frankly a much more stable regulatory and legal scene due to it. It would also still be unthinkable to purge and dismantle agencies without Congress passing a law to do so. We wouldn't be the laughingstock of the world, we wouldn't be concerned about losing our democracy or about an impending constitutional crisis. Our economy would be stable and the rich wouldn't be getting astronomically richer at the expense of the poor. At least not at the same rate. Fascism, oligarchy, and kleptocracy wouldn't be topics of our daily conversations. The Supreme Court would have been a liberal majority. There wouldn't have been an insurrection and a felonious president. She likely would have been re-elected and wouldn't have been as feckless as Biden. Extreme improvement. Sure, she'd make some missteps, but she wouldn't be kidnapping innocent people, shaving their heads and shipping them off to foreign prisons. She wouldn't build a camp reminiscent of the Third Reich in the Sunshine State and let a puppy-shooting glamazon silicon doll run the entire operation. The CDC wouldn't be a complete disaster. The director and 4 top officials wouldn't have just resigned. Public health would not be a dumpster fire heading downwards every day. Some things would have been better, but Hillary had her head completely up Kissinger's butt, and just as many Palestinians would have been killed. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? The COVID death toll would have been a lot lower for 2 reasons. First, greater competency of the Clinton administration. Second, the right-wing misinformation would have flown in the opposite direction, much more similar to the right-wing fear-mongering we saw in 2014 about Ebola. You'd hear, "COVID is the Black Death, Hillary is lying, the death rate is well over 15%, millions of Americans have died. Hillary created it and unleashed it on an innocent China." The red states would have gone into full lockdown. SYG laws would have been amended to make it legal to shoot anyone not wearing a mask. Right-wingers would have locked themselves into their basements to save themselves from the Hillary plague, to the point that there would have been deaths from starvation, and the far right would have demanded that every single one of those deaths is recorded as a COVID fatality. This right-wing paranoia would have resulted in a much lower COVID case and death count during the summer of 2020. She might have still lost in 2020 with a race as to which happens first, the election or the death toll reaching 100,000. With the GOP screaming that Trump would have kept the death toll below 50,000, election night in our universe it was at 250,000 by the way, and in all likelihood the death toll would have reached 100k on November 5th. The death toll would have continued to be lower in 2021, as without Biden in office there would be no right-wing war on vaccines to try and keep the death toll high. Millions of right-wingers would have lined up to get vaccinated, with fights breaking out as demand outstrips supply. There's no anti-vax movement, there are no claims that the vaccine is killing thousands. Several 100,000 people who died in the summer and fall of 2021 just don't. By mid-2023, the COVID death toll in the USA is 200,000. I think there would totally be an anti-vax movement. It would just be the same weird hippie left fringe group that it was before COVID and wouldn't have spread nearly as far. I actually disagree with Hillary losing re-election in 2020, because when a crisis happens, that's actually historically been a second win for an incumbent, if they treat the crisis seriously, which Trump refused to do. He was actually handed a re-election win on a silver platter, and he completely bungled it by being so vain and proud that he had to cover up the seriousness of the pandemic. If you don't believe me, world leaders who treated the pandemic seriously generally got re-elected, and world leaders who didn't got booted. A more obvious example is how George Bush's approval rating skyrocketed in the aftermath of September 11th. Like he had more than 80% approval from the whole country. That's unheard of today. The reaction of the pandemic was make or break. If Hillary Clinton had shown she was doing everything she could to lower the deaths, it actually could have saved her if her approval numbers were slipping. It would be an F-ton better than it is now. We wouldn't have been stuck with this nut in the White House, a dictator, unqualified, convicted felon. We'd not be the laughingstock of the world. Clinics would still be legal and nobody would have lost their rights, and people wouldn't have been separated from their families. The country would be absolutely normal. The closest thing to any drama would be the GOP would still be investigating the Clintons. Meanwhile, our allies would continue to be our allies. The pandemic wouldn't have been politicized. Donald J. Trump would have launched that TV network he'd wanted to do from the start, and then faded into obscurity as people got bored of hearing him ramble on. Well, the MAGA folks would have remained in the closet with their racism, misogyny, crazy ideas, and beliefs. Less people would have died from COVID. There's a lot that would have been different. I don't think we can begin to comprehend how much Republicans would have lost their mind and gone frothing at the mouth insane during the pandemic when she urged precautions. But Gore was too boring, and Hillary was a warhawk. Biden was too old, and Kamala had a bad laugh. Give me a frickin' break. No, you got that one wrong. They claimed that Kamala slept her way to the top. I had a friend who bleated this out and I was speechless. They were too far gone from absorbing that Fox News bullcrap. Trump had zero political experience, but Kamala might have done the deed, therefore Trump 2024? God damn. Who knows? I feel like the world is just filled with nothing but phallus heads nowadays. Perhaps just as polarized because of the easily manipulated right-wing rage against her for 4 to 8 years, it would have been completely insane. But the US would almost certainly be on a much more normal track in terms of policy, operation, and simple, basic but critical things like the rule of law and adherence to the Constitution. The Supreme Court wouldn't be such a mess like it is now, from which it may never recover until America ultimately fails as a democracy, which is coming a lot faster than I'd ever expected, and the corruption of the Supreme Court is a big reason why. What we're facing now didn't start in 2017 or 2008 or 2001. This modern push started in the 80s with the backlash to the equal rights movement, the desegregation in specific, the new anti-freedom of religious movement, with literal witch hunts in the 80s, and the conservative co-opting of the NRA, and the problems around acquired immune deficiency syndrome. I mean, it was Richard Nixon. He built Reagan for that. My own elementary-aged children wouldn't have had to deal with a Christian nationalist Supreme Court when they're at the age of potentially having children of their own. Sorry fellas, we tried, but the right-wing brain rot and "you didn't earn my vote" crowds were just too strong. Hey folks, I have been keeping an eye out for contrary points of view here, but at least in this particular group of answers, they've all been fairly unanimously damning of the current administration, and with varying degrees of enthusiasm about the difference it would have made if Hillary won in 2016. I do believe in at least hearing out opposing arguments, even if I am in the camp of not liking the state of affairs in Washington at the moment. But yeah, I'm sorry for the apparent bias in the answers here. The thoughts of having a normal government or country make me want to cry. I hate what's happening. I think it would have been pretty similar to Obama's terms, to be honest. Well, the deficit would have been less. Thinking about it, the only difference would be the current Supreme Court, which would be great and a huge win for Dems and women and LGBTQ+. I think the pandemic, while Clinton was in charge, would have gone more smoothly as far as getting things to states faster and not having them beg her for tests and PPE. I think she'd see it spreading to Italy and ask companies to start using whatever plastic factories they had to manufacture things that we'd need, like Frederick Roosevelt did in World War II. Trump and MAGA would still be angry, he'd still say everything he did in 2020, and while doing so he'd make his MAGA base even bigger. He'd probably win in 2020 and run again in 24, and probably win because Democrats would be even more tired. Now, if Gore won in 2000, I can't imagine what it would be like today. Again, stronger Supreme Court, Bush nominated Roberts and Alito, and Obama probably would have still run in 2008? Although, if Obama won, we might be right back here because Trump started getting his MAGA base when Obama ran and was elected. Not sure where we'd be if Romney won instead of Obama in 2008. Calmer Republican Party for at least a little while, right? Or was Trump going to steamroll in 2016 regardless? Let's imagine if Al Gore won the election in 2000 instead of W being appointed by a 5-4 majority opinion from the Supreme Court. Maybe there's no September 11th attack, no war looking for weapons of mass destruction, no 20-year war in Afghanistan, maybe no world economic catastrophe in 2018. The list is endless. Does anyone else have anything they can think of to add to this long list? It would have been very bad. There would have been taco trucks on every corner. Had Hillary won, COVID would have still happened, Trump would have resurfaced and pushed all the BS conspiracy theories, Americans would have fallen for it because that's what we do, and Trump would have beaten her in 2020. Most likely he would have had 2 consecutive terms. Americans were never smart enough to avoid this, and Trump was never going to let it go. It's tough to be too optimistic because no matter what, you still have the rise of social media driving people to extremes, enabling conspiracy theorists and whack jobs. But I still think we'd be in a better place overall. The files about that one guy and his island would still not be released. The pivotal election wasn't 2016 when Trump beat Clinton. The pivotal election wasn't 2000 when Bush beat Gore, although that gets closer. We'd be in a significantly better spot if Gore had won. The pivotal election was 1980 when Reagan won in a landslide. Jimmy Carter was not a popular president in 1980. If he had been primaried or not run with incumbency, I don't know if Reagan would have won so big. But Reagan and his policies led to where we're at now. Class wars bred from trickle-down economics and Reaganomics racist policies and destruction of affordable college, environmental deregulation, the list goes on. Well, the White House would have had a rose garden. I mean, it's just so crazy to think about. We've reversed so many good things in this country. We're afraid to speak up for our reproductive rights. We're targeted for hate. We can't even think about this without going crazy, but he's sending military into our cities. We're getting oil tycoons and no environmental department, which is sad. Judges are bad, we have so many mental health issues, and he reversed nationwide healthcare. I can't get out of bed in the morning. I look around and this country has been completely reversed. I honestly have both a therapist and a psychologist helping me cope. And lots of meds. What can we do? It's hopeless. I'm sure he'll find a way to run again. I can't even think about it. I'm tired and worn out, and I just want to give up. It would be better than what's currently going on, that's for sure. The most controversial issue surrounding her was an email server. Sure, we'd still be spreading democracy all over the place via bombs and corrupt regime installments, but at least our constitution wouldn't be torn to shreds. ICE for sure wouldn't be allowed to kidnap legal and illegal immigrants without due process. Trump stops getting the Republican nomination, most likely after losing again in 2020, and we're way better off for it. Trump is a system, not the cause of some much deeper issues in this country, and it doesn't die with him. You don't have to go too far back in history to see that our country always prospers more with a Democrat president. Safe bet that we'd be doing better. It would probably still be bad, but more boring. Like I'd feel annoyed, but not threatened. I feel at the very least, politics would be a background phenomenon like it always was. We wouldn't be reacting to insane headlines about awful crap happening every 3 hours. The biggest difference today would almost certainly be in the courts. She would have replaced Scalia with a liberal justice, and without Trump's 3 appointments, Roe v. Wade would likely still stand. Voting right cases would have gone the other way, and the federal bench would lean left rather than right. The US would still be in the Paris Climate Accord. The Iran nuclear deal wouldn't have collapsed, and allies in Europe wouldn't have spent 4 years questioning whether Washington was serious about NATO. The pandemic response would have been more coherent with clear messaging and stronger federal coordination, which probably would have lowered deaths even if resistance in parts of the country remained high. Domestic politics, however, would have been brutal. Republicans in Congress were already preparing to hound her with investigations, and populist resentment wouldn't have vanished just because Trump lost. It might even have intensified outside of government. What you wouldn't see is January 6 or the same erosion of institutional norms, because Clinton would have governed within the usual boundaries of the presidency, for better or worse. The country would have been more stable abroad, less chaotic in its institutions, and more progressive on climate and healthcare, but no less divided at home. The shocking truths about the biggest wastes of money in history. The Darien Scheme. For those who don't know, it was Scotland's attempt to set up a colony in Panama and link the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. About 20% of Scotland's wealth was thrown at it, and it completely failed in just 2 short years. It turns out Scottish people don't survive long in the sun in the tropics. It's like Wicked Witch of the West getting splashed with water. This is the answer. Imagine throwing so much money at a project only for it to immediately fail, and in order to survive, you need to merge your country with another country. Got to be that person who bought the first ever tweet as an NFT, purchased for $2.9 billion, now worth $4. I totally forgot about the NFT hype. That was a weird few months when a non-trivial number of people were trying to convince me a JPEG of a poorly drawn monkey was somehow worth more than a car. Me forgetting to turn off the lights, according to my dad. The CIA putting a microphone into a cat to spy on commies only for that cat to immediately get hit by a car. I think it was like $6 million and countless years of preparation and training only to be lost under some tires. And with what I know about cats, it can't be ruled out that the cat did it on purpose, purely because it knew how much it would inconvenience the CIA agents. What fascinated me about Acoustic Kitten, that's the name of the operation, is that anyone that spent 3 minutes with a cat will know that all of this was a very, very stupid idea. I can only explain it as a result of the amount of substances the CIA was using at that moment. $4 trillion to replace the Afghan insurgents, only for them to be replaced with more of the same thing, has got to be right up there. The whole Mo throwing Barney out at the bar meme comes to mind. I'd have to say that gym membership I didn't cancel until 8 years after I moved away from the gym. Look, I know that this is a partial joke answer and very much small fish compared to some of the other ventures here, but my god, the personal lack of action on display here is absolutely breathtaking. Was your life that busy that you didn't notice the several $100s of wasted money? Or are you just that lazy and unmotivated? It's almost impressive if it's the latter one. Probably the Dutch guy who spent money buying tulips in 1636. 35 billion for the metaverse. Mark was really inspired by Ready Player One. The Great Wall of Gorgon, built by the ancient Sasanian Empire in modern-day Iran. The purpose was to protect themselves from nomadic invaders. It was constructed with 100 million man-days of labor, which is equivalent to around 300,000 workers toiling for 5 years straight. Considering the average labor cost, material expenses, and other related expenditures, the total cost of the project could have reached an astronomical sum of approximately 130 billion in today's dollars. Needless to say that it failed its intended purpose, as Huns devised techniques to overcome the wall without much hassle. I can't believe nobody's mentioned World War I. Literally all of the world's most wealthy nations completely financially ruining themselves and slaughtering a large proportion of their young men, and all the historical consequences that followed over essentially nothing, and achieving nothing except for a massive geopolitical regression with costs which we're arguably still reeling from today. New Zealand spent about $25 million in their own currency on a flag referendum. Before it started, the public were against it, saying they'd never change the flag. The government persisted anyway. 2 years later, the public voted to keep our current flag, so we did. Massive frickin' waste of time and money for a result they should have been expecting from the very beginning. Hey, it wasn't a complete waste of money. It produced Laser Kiwi. Look it up if you haven't seen this majestic beast already. The War on Substances. They won. What could possibly go wrong with handing the manufacture, distribution, and retail of powerful, addictive substances to organized crime? Nobody could have foreseen that being a problem. NFTs for sure. I remember Seth Green was going to make a whole show based around his NFT monkey that someone stole and then bought from under his nose, and the show got stuck in a limbo. That was kind of funny. The banana with the duct tape. The purchase included instructions on how to renovate the art piece when the banana is eaten. You go to a store and buy a new one, and then use the supplied tape to stick it to a wall. It's the art that keeps on giving. The Cleveland Browns paying $250 million for Deshaun Watson. Okay, story time for non-Americans who don't know who Deshaun Watson is and why that number is so awful. The Cleveland Browns have long been one of the worst teams in the NFL. A while back, they finally made it to the playoffs, thanks to the effort of one Baker Mayfield, another quarterback. However, Browns' front office, for some idiotic reason, didn't want to retain Mayfield, and so decided to spend $230 to $250 million on Deshaun Watson, as well as include several draft picks in that trade. At the time, Watson had been a quarterback for the Houston Texans, and in his prime was seen as a generational talent who could take a good team to the Super Bowl. At the same time, allegations of a pretty concerning nature were springing up against Watson, totaling about 20 women. It doesn't matter if he was the best quarterback in history, that's awful PR, and it teed off the entire NFL fanbase. Still, the Browns paid for him. Cut to 2025, and Baker Mayfield was able to make it to the playoffs with his new team, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, even though they'd just lost before. And Deshaun Watson has played frickin' awful football with the Cleveland Browns. He's genuinely one of the worst quarterbacks out there. He'd been suspended for 11 games due to the allegations, and he'd taken numerous major injuries since getting signed. His most recent one being tearing his ACL, which knocks you out for the season. Before the Watson trade, the Browns were seen as a team people pitied, because it felt like they could never catch a break each and every year. Now they're a reviled fan base, and I don't see their reputation ever recovering until every single person involved with that trade is fired and out of the organization. In short, the Cleveland Browns replaced their already good quarterback Baker Mayfield with an alleged R-wordist in Deshaun Watson for millions of guaranteed dollars, only for that quarterback to be absolute trash. And as a small addition, his contract is fully guaranteed. The only way for the Browns to void it is if he either medically retires or if he's convicted or accused of another unspeakable act crime outside of the 20+ that they knew about before he was signed. Most of Dubai's artificial islands. Those guys who bought tickets to the Titanic sub. The Acoustic Kitty Project. It was a covert CIA operation during the Cold War that aimed to use a cat as a mobile eavesdropping device. Why a cat? Well, they have a natural ability to move discreetly, blend into the environment without raising suspicion, and were allowed around and inside the Kremlin. The hope was that the cat, fitted with advanced listening equipment, could wander undetected near Soviet officials and pick up private conversations. The project, which cost over $20 million, involved surgically implanting a microphone in the cat's ear canal, a small transmitter in its chest, and an antenna running along its tail. The technology was cutting edge for the time, and the idea was to create a living, undetectable spy tool. However, the project quickly ran into problems. Cats are notoriously independent and difficult to train, often ignoring commands and getting distracted. On its first test mission, the cat was reportedly sent to eavesdrop on a conversation outside a Soviet compound, but it wandered off. Some accounts suggest it was tragically hit by a car shortly after deployment. Ultimately, the project was deemed a failure, and the CIA concluded that animals, especially cats, were too unpredictable for espionage purposes. All that planning foiled by the old, "Will someone please get that damn cat out of here?" defense? I mean, my corporate offices are just full of random cats wandering around. Goodness knows how many of them are corporate spies, but our maintenance staff clearly have a soft spot for those cuties. I didn't see this bloody cat coming up twice in one video, that's for sure. But yep, as someone wrote earlier, relying on a cat for literally anything other than it demanding food in a way that suggests it's never been fed in its life before is a futile task. Internet in Australia. Back in the 2000s, an outgoing Labour government proposed a $30 billion fibre-to-the-premise nationwide broadband network internet plan, promising speeds of up to 100 megabits per second. The incoming coalition government promised a cheaper fibre-to-the-node broadband network that utilised the already installed copper wiring for just under $950 million. And now, because of that, the internet in Australia is just barely becoming able to reach speeds on 1,000 megabits a second after a revision to the planned rollout, which has cost the Australian government over $70 billion. The war on substances, maybe. Trillions of dollars later, and smack is 50 times cheaper and 10 times more potent. The monorail in Springfield. I disagree. There's nothing on earth like a genuine, bona fide, electrified 6-car monorail. King Louis IX spent something like the entire GDP worth of France on religious relics such as a piece of the True Cross, a sliver of wood said to have been from the cross that Jesus was crucified on. It doesn't take a genius to see that it was fake now. All of the claimed pieces of the True Cross in existence today add up to far more than the size of the original cross. Brexit. Tanking the economy to own the libs. But at least the NHS is well funded now. Quantitative easing and the banking bailout. We've created a system where businesses can be too big to fail and they can expect a bailout when they get into trouble. But when times are good, all the profits go to their shareholders. So we've privatized profit and socialized risk. This means we've effectively rigged the game for capitalism, making a system where market forces are no longer fully in play and creating zombie companies that should have folded a long time ago. My old boss was something of an industry darling, and while I worked with him, he got poached off to a smaller competitor on the promise of joining upper management there. But the thing is, all of those record-setting sales numbers were fake and everybody knew it. He'd been caught cooking the books and destroying product on multiple occasions, and he'd been caught taking huge kickbacks from tertiary suppliers. He'd even just, not show up sometimes. So I don't really know what to make of that. The books were clearly cooked and everyone involved was totally aware of it. I think that either the entire thing was a fraudulent house of cards that everyone was taking advantage of to embezzle, or the real books showed that despite all of that, he was actually the GOAT, which means everyone across the industry was doing this. I then went on to a smaller company that was starting to get big on a new and innovative product, except that they were in the red to the tune of $2 million a year. The entire company was entirely supported by private investors. Apparently, this is both normal and good in the business world. I don't know, man. I don't think money is real. I think certain people just never questioned whether or not they actually have what they say they have, and success is just how close you can get to these people. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Panama Canal first attempt. The French didn't understand what they were getting themselves into, and death from mosquitoes killed off too many that the project had to be abandoned. 22,000 people died and a huge part of the French population went bankrupt after having invested their savings in the company because the guy behind it had created the Suez Canal, which was a giant success. But the issue is that Panama is full of malaria mosquitoes and it's impossible to do anything there. Workers died like flies. When the US government took over, they were better prepared, as they learned much from the failed attempt. They started a civil war in Colombia to create a new country for the canal, and then covered up any puddle or water container they found. Then sprayed deadly chemicals everywhere. It was the only way to do it. Bailing out billion-dollar companies during COVID like Delta Airlines, which charges me $50 to bring a bag on an airplane, instead of, training new doctors or fast-tracking those already in med school or paying off their student loan debt. I can't believe no one has mentioned the failed siege of Rhodes in 305 to 304 BC. Long story short, Demetrius I, king of Macedon, was afraid of Rhodes' naval power and their potential alliance with Egypt. Demetrius decides he's going to attack Rhodes, but to do so he's going to need massive machines of war. With Alexander the Great's innovations, Demetrius bolstered and scaled them up. This guy was known as the Besieger for his skill in siege warfare. Demetrius invents and has the Helepolis built, a massive rolling tower on wheels. The Helepolis was a great siege tower, 130 feet tall and 65 feet wide. It sat on 8 wheels and casters, so it could be moved forward and back and laterally as well. It had multiple stories connected by sturdy stairs, one for ascending and one for descending. Its sides were iron-plated for fireproofing, and it had portals that opened when the catapults fired. The Helepolis weighed 160 tons and required hundreds of men to move it via the capstan and belt drive, and thousands more to push it from behind. It contained a variety of armaments on each of its 9 floors. 2 180-pound catapults and 1 60-pounder were on the first floor. The catapults were categorized by the weight of the missile it threw. 3 60-pounders were on the second floor, and 2 30-pounders on each floor above that. The top 2 floors contained men armed with bows and dart throwers for killing defenders on the city walls. The tower's ironclad, mechanically adjusted apertures were lined with animal skins, wool, and seaweed to make them fireproof. The Helepolis was the largest siege tower of its time. When Demetrius brought the Helepolis to bear, the Rhodians knocked a hole through their own wall under the cover of night, where they expected the Helepolis to attack. They then flooded the entire area with water and sewage, so that when the massive tower was moved up the next morning, it became deeply mired in mud. Ultimately, the siege failed and Demetrius left Rhodes, leaving behind all of his siege engines. Years later, the Rhodians sold the remains of those engines, including the Helepolis, which earned them enough money to build one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Colossus of Rhodes. This is certainly the flaw in Death Star-style tactics relying on one massive superweapon, isn't it? All the eggs in one basket. Should have just built a bunch of regular siege towers. Some of them make it to the walls and you throw lives at the problem until it goes away. Sieges are always costly, there's no way around it. Take your gruesome victory instead of the humiliating defeat. Although, maybe this defeat lost fewer men. Maybe things were better this way. Scientology. Well, for most people, but for a small few it makes them wealthy and powerful. When COVID was in full swing and the entire trading market crashed, then the Federal Reserve tried to stimulate and save our overlord corporate scum by injecting $3 trillion into the stock market just for it to immediately crash again like 2 minutes later. AOL merger with Time Warner. The Vietnam War at $176 billion. Countless dead for no reason and nothing positive came of it. Well, we got Apocalypse Now for what that's worth. When I bought tickets to Joker 2, the first movie was enough. Joker 2 should have had him riding off into the sunset to start his career as the Joker with Harley. I cannot believe what they did. It was awful. Maybe the real Joker was the one who bought the tickets along the way. Stonehenge. The whole thing was supposed to be 18 inches tall, but the work crew misread the runes. The Iraq War, 2003 through 2011. Regarding the cost, estimates vary, but it's in the trillions of dollars, with some sources suggesting around $3 trillion when including long-term healthcare for veterans, interest on borrowed money, and a few other considerations. Funko Pops. Oh, it's not like they're that expensive unless you're really into rare collecting. You can find a lot for like $7 at Five Below, or $15 or so elsewhere, and some people like them. I don't really care about them at all, but my son thinks they're fun to have, so he's got about 12 to 15 of characters that he likes and just has them on display. They're not any more expensive or wasteful than other types of home decor, just not everyone's style. Jeff Bezos' $42 million clock that will allegedly run for 10,000 years. I'm no fan of Jeff Amazon, but this is essentially a conceptual art project, so I don't think it can truly be called a waste of money because I think the goals of the project are being met. When the US government bailed out Goldman Sachs after Goldman Sachs bought AIG's failing bonds at pennies on the dollar, fully knowing that they'd fail and getting bailed out by ex-Goldman Sachs Ben Bernanke at the full face value of the bonds. Biggest robbery of the American taxpayer and largest waste of money in history. Colin Powell's lies about weapons of mass destruction and the resulting war on terror is also up there. But to be fair, the US had to respond to September 11th physically. It was just so overblown. Indulgences, as in the free pass given for sins during the Crusades. You could literally buy God's forgiveness for sins past or future. I'm no accountant, but I'm pretty sure that's a waste of money. That's what some sucker in purgatory says. Anyone who ever invested a cent into meme coins, especially the Hawk coin. Oh god, that one dude lost his kid's college fund on the Hawk coin. I hope that was fake, but if it wasn't, man, that makes me feel good about myself. At least I haven't screwed up that bad. Okay, it's not the dumbest, but it's a personal favorite of mine. The US military spent hundreds of millions developing the XM29 rifle. It was basically a grenade launcher with some extra bells and whistles. They wanted to replace the M16, so every grunt would be carrying one. In a shockingly unshocking turn of events, that's a frickin' war crime. 300+ millions of dollars later, and a single Google search could have prevented it. Everyone here has better answers, but I've got to mention Twitter. What an absolutely idiotic way to buy a company. Acquire because someone told you can't, fire 80% of the staff, abolish the branding completely, remove mod support, offer worthless utilities that used to be free as part of a premium service, then force push notifications to every single user that are really just your own personal tweets. And when people still won't listen to you masquerade as an anonymous user on your own app or company, artificially inflate your own follower account and be your own biggest hype man. Nah fam, he bought the presidency and increased his net worth by like 200 billion just from that. Oligarchy, baby. The UK voting for Brexit. This has cost billions already in lost GDP, with the eventual figure likely in the hundreds of billions as its impact compounds in the decades to come. Collective madness. Capitalist agriculture and food distribution. Like every second potato is just thrown away. Milk is overproduced and thrown away, cowhides are destroyed rather than tanned for leather to keep leather prices stable, insecticides and herbicides to maintain massive monocrops, killing pollinators and low-key poisoning us instead of higher total mass yield, less intensive multicropping, like keeping pigs on an apple orchard to eat the fallen apples, where the apple-eating beetles lay their eggs to kill off a pest instead of spraying poison everywhere. Nope, but instead we feed the pigs unsold grocery store stuff, all ground up, with the packaging left on rather than paying people to take it off first. So much for labor efficiency, thanks capitalist goons. Restaurants aren't sending their best either. It's waste, cruelty, and exploration all around the chain, and the cost is incalculably high. Tax breaks for the rich. That pair of roller skates I bought during the pandemic. Pretty much any of the hobbies taken up during the pandemic. Cut away to the crochet kit under the bed, coughing with dust. I mean, this is really just an ego plug for me, but my pandemic sourdough is still going strong, baby. Although all the miniatures I bought do in fact bring me to your level. Right here in the losing spender side with you, actually. When Mobutu decided to print Zaire money, but the cost of print turned out more expensive than the total worth of the printed money. Politicians spending hours of taxpayer-funded time on oral masturbation speeches to promote themselves when they already know how they'll vote on things, plus the time spent on researching and speech writing. In human history? I don't know, but I have a smaller anecdote that I witnessed personally. They wanted to automate the cranes where I used to work and wouldn't take input from any of the crane operators. They very grossly misunderstood the speed at which we ran them and used every other mill that had automated cranes as a reference. After having worked in countless other mills since as a contractor, I'll put those operators up to toe with any other mill anywhere in the world and blindly put an absurd amount of money on it. The contracted team actually found improvements to the industry standard of automated cranes and steel mills. They achieved a peak rate of 205 picks in 24 hours. But we were routinely at a pace of over 750 in 24 hours, with a few peaks of over 1,100. 100 people advising against the idea to an entire committee couldn't make the point that the best steel mills in the world aren't the best because they have automated cranes. They can have an automated crane because they're operated like the best steel mills in the world. We just weren't operated well. Anyway, something like 80 million and 3 years later, plus the cost of production downtime during each test, and they scrapped the project, and the cranes are ready to be automated at the flip of a switch that hasn't been flipped in 5 years. This profession has a secret substance problem that nobody talks about? Is this the group of questions where we all find out that most people we interact with daily are on stuff most of or all of the time? Actually, in America, the testing of sanitary sewer water shows that everyone is on way more stuff than they report if you just surveyed them. And as someone who used to test sanitary sewer water, I can tell you that everyone who does that job is dosed up to the eyeballs as well. Once I got into dental school, our eyes were opened by the Wellbeing Foundation, an arm of the Missouri Dental Association. A couple of the guys who were addicts and had been in recovery for years came in and discussed substance overuse and how wildly it can spiral. After talking to a friend and mentor who's been sober from opioids and alcohol, both for 45 years, he talked about how many healthcare professionals from all disciplines there were just in our little rural area. No names or personal info, of course. It's crazy to me still that people I would never have suspected, and so many of them were the high-functioning Type A go-getters. Lawyers. Holy frick. Yeah, I've been a lawyer for over 30 years. I can't tell you how many of them are burned out from the profession by 40 and spiraling into addiction. The practice of law is often both boring and intensely stressful. It's never glamorous. I imagine the problem begins earlier and is worse in big law because of the huge billing requirements, but those lawyers have the staff to keep them from committing malpractice or an ethical violation. Many lawyers end up broke and some lose their license. My state has a whole office dedicated to lawyer assistance for these problems. Lawyers are also a top answer for alcoholism. Many of them have a severe drinking problem. I'm a bartender and I got out of a pickle when the judge and prosecutor were regulars. The judge said to the prosecutor, "This doesn't seem like the friendly guy I know. Would you agree?" "Yeah, Your Honor. State recommends that the case be dismissed." This is when my lawyer turned to me and said, "What the frick just happened?" Every single meal at every restaurant you've enjoyed has been lovingly prepared by a team of herb heads. If it's a fancy restaurant, then they're taking white snow instead. I'm always kind of baffled by this one. I may have ADHD, I'll find out soon. But when I'm medicated on green herb, I forget everything, even more than I do when I'm sober. There's no chance in hell I could work in a kitchen and remember to take this off the stove or that out of the oven. Hats off to whoever can do that, because it's certainly not me. I'm self-employed, and I can tell you that at the place where I work at, that guy is lighting up a doobie 24/7. Well, so far, this self-employed narrator's only dangerous addiction is plastic overpriced miniatures. In fact, my alcoholism is a fraction of its former self. Yay to moving to different habits. I work in manufacturing, and the number of people who are alcoholics and other addicts at work is probably between 5 to 10%. The number of people who are alcoholics and other addicts at home is probably closer to 50. Factory night shifts run on nose snow here. If they actually substance tested, they'd lose half the factory. I used to work for Ford and yep, same. Crazy amounts of snow or pills that keep you up. Crazy stuff happens at night though. I had one guy trying to gather as much money as he could and was working 2.5 shifts, meaning he had 2 full-time jobs and a part-time one. We'd let him work the first 4 hours and then let him sleep on his lunch until clock-out time. I've done call center work. 80% of the people there are high or drunk. It's literally the only way to mentally deal with 50 calls in an hour. It's crazy, but I did customer service work from home and I tried to drink some beers a few times towards the end of my shift while taking calls, but it just made me paranoid that I'd make a mistake, so it wasn't even fun. I know a lot of my coworkers were doing that though. My manager even encouraged it. She was like, "We don't get paid enough, so just do what you have to do in order to get through the day." Believe it or not, orchestra musicians, Adderall, painkillers especially. It's a very, very competitive field and they always have to be at 110%. When I was at Juilliard, there'd be about 10 orchestra players who were baked out of their minds on any performance. One of my best friends was this proper Korean girl who was on something 24/7. We'd get insanely blazed and she'd just go to rehearsal without having looked at the music. She'd just sight read while fully medicated. One friend liked to perform while tripping on A. He made it to Juilliard from masters. Substances are everywhere. I worked as a professional rock and roll musician and I'm blowing the whistle now. I suspect illegal substances are being used in the industry. Self-righteous gasp! Farriers, as in people who do horseshoeing. 98% of them are extreme heavy drinkers. The job is extremely high stress and high stakes. Most people don't realize that shoeing a horse is extremely dangerous. They see videos online and think that horses are just big dogs, and they are not. They are like 1,200-pound or more animals with the flight instincts of a deer. They can crush you and not even realize it. On top of that, you spend long periods of time isolated in a truck driving between stops, dealing with traffic and other terrible drivers. And on top of that, you're interacting with owners who know next to nothing about hoof care but have the ability to fire you, and depending on how many horses they own, put you in financial ruin. Horses get new shoes every 4 to 5 weeks, so your body never gets a break. You're expected to be on call at all times on top of dealing with veterinarians and the people training the horses. Law firms. Holy moly. I did a semester at a community college for paralegal studies, and we had a class on how to navigate situations if the lawyers you're working with are addicts, and possibly working high or drunk. And a lot of it was based on how to save your job while still maintaining professional integrity. Like, you might not want to report your supervising lawyer to his direct supervisor, but instead reach out to a peer of his and ask for intervention. It was wild to see all of these professional lawyers on the panel telling us how, in an ideal world, we should be reporting people to the bar, but in reality, that won't change a damn thing besides costing us our jobs. So the best thing we can do to affect clients positively is figure out workarounds. I'm an attorney, and my partner once told me if they start substance testing lawyers, they'd lose all the good ones. Construction, which is terrifying. I think a better question is what profession has surprisingly few users? Lab. It's lab. We're all autistic and we all follow the rules. You know, reading these comments, it sounds a bit like every profession is full of substances. Politic. In the UK, they found traces of white snow in all the bathrooms of the Houses of Parliament, and Michael Gove, a senior Conservative, was caught on camera off his nut in the chambers, but absolutely nothing is done about it. Meanwhile, they continue to criminalize the substances that they consume. Hypocrites. I think they found something similar in the US as well. I worked in a fine dining restaurant across from the state capitol. Our customers were 90% staffers, lobbyists, and other people working in and around politics. They drank like it was going out of style. They partied hard with us, and they'd spend the whole night talking about all the events they'd gone to over the years. They were also having a lot of affairs. Their jobs required quite a bit of travel when it wasn't session days, and they took advantage of that. Most of the time, it felt like I was serving 40-plus-year-old frat bros and sorority girls. It seems like it's most jobs. The better question would have been, which jobs, if any, don't put you at high risk for substance use or alcoholism? From the responses, it seems like a societal problem rather than an occupational one. I'm sure someone more eloquent can expand on that. The mental health field. Most of us have some lived experience ourselves. That, combined with the secondary trauma we experience on a daily basis, leads many of us to turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms. Airline pilots. It's really hard for them to get help because admitting they need help is almost the same consequence as getting caught. Granted, I don't think it's a massive problem, but addiction is everywhere, man. My best friend is a public defender. He drinks like nobody I've ever met. Keeps a breathalyzer. He blows a .25 or more every night and then stops for 11 hours before he's got to drive to work so that he's blowing zeros in the morning. He has a script for Adderall, one for Ambien, and one for absurd amounts of Klonopin. And he smokes green herb. He used to do a lot of smack too, but he substituted that with ketamine. About 14 grams of ketamine a week. My God, I mean, I guess that's technically a functioning addict in that they make sure they have no problem getting back to work and stuff, but that's just a horrifying amount that he's just presumably taking on the daily. If I did one dose of all those things in 1 year, I'd consider that the wildest year of my life. Scaffolders. God, yeah. I couldn't believe how many people did stuff and openly talked about doing it. I watched one on site puff on a smack pipe and then strike a scaffold. That was scary stuff. Being a tow truck driver is a smackhead profession more often than not. It's not always illegal stuff, but K-12 teaching. One of the reasons I quit was because I saw so many teachers developing a, well, home is where the wine is, lifestyle after their first few years. At one school, I was gifted alcohol on my first day as a joke because you're gonna need it. In the education community, alcoholism and other substances use absolutely exploded during the pandemic when teachers had to work from home with an increased level of stress, decreased support, and constant access to substances. A lot of teachers are also hard partiers outside of work hours because of the stress. Very few teachers are going to show up to teach students while on stuff, but some people I knew definitely did that stuff routinely on the weekends as a way to blow off steam. It takes a lot less time than actual self-care. I'm sober and in the 12-step community. The amount of teachers in my meetings who were recovering from addictions developed during the pandemic, every possible kind of addiction, is insane. I'm very happy that I switched career paths. This surprised me when I was a bartender. A disproportionate number of my regulars were elementary school teachers. I tried to get my boss to let us have a special night for educators like we have for industry people, but he wouldn't go for it. I don't think people want it advertised that we're driving our teachers to drink. I'm guessing HR, they all seem to be doing smack. Sales. I used to work in sales and my coworkers did white snow on the daily, amongst other things. Oh my god. I worked at a sales company and our new HR lady was obsessed with professionalism and she wanted to substance test everyone in the company once a year. The management flat out asked her if she had a plan for replacing 50% of our salespeople. I had to break that to my sales manager. A disgruntled former employee wrote on Glassdoor that people were smoking green herb in the parking lot, and while true, so was that guy. The management team was kicking around, instituting substance testing in response. My manager asked my opinion, and I told him it was a great idea if they wanted to replace their entire sales team. He asked me about a few of the ones that you wouldn't have suspected, and I reiterated that it was a great idea if you wanted to replace your entire sales team. They just asked us to please quit smoking Mary J in the parking lot instead. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Scrolling through this thread, it seems like a pretty large segment of the population of the US is struggling with substance overuse, and I almost feel left out. Hairdressers. Yes, I'm surprised we didn't hear this earlier. Hairdressers are freaks and they party like there's no tomorrow. One salon I worked at was full of people strung out on crystal, including the owners. We had an employee meeting where everyone was advised to keep on track of their stuff and wipe their noses if applicable. They put a smoke detector in the bathroom because they wanted everyone to go out back to smoke theirs. The owner would sit in a little room and watch everyone on cameras all day. The owners also went to New York and came straight to the salon from the airport. They were all so dosed up that they started pulling out all the fancy pipes they bought while there and showing them to clients. It was a circus. I quit 2 weeks later. I can personally speak to this. The high-end fashion industry, both legal and illegal. It's easy to stay thin if your diet is water and pills. It might be quicker to say professions that aren't commonly on illegal stuff. Engineers. They're high on meth. Anesthesiologists. I had a case where someone stole fentanyl off an anesthesiologist's cart. The hospital figured, we can just test everyone who had access to the room, and whoever tests positive for fentanyl is the one that stole the cart. Nope, everyone tested positive for fentanyl. The anesthesiologist, the tech, the nurse, the pharmacist, and the pharm tech all tested positive. Turns out more than 30% of people who work in anesthesiology fields self-report diverting substances for personal use. Those are just the ones that casually admit it as well. Anybody in a call center. Nurses. Remembering a former nurse who taught me how to embezzle morphine from the hospital. These people don't play with their stuff. Hey, don't forget doctors. A lot of them are using a lot of Adderall and any stimulant, really. Nurses get a bad rep, and I understand that, but in peds nursing, I haven't seen any overuse at all. Or they're just good at hiding it. My source? I was a doctor in another country and now a ped nurse in the US. I currently work in a hospital, but I'm not employed by them. I work for a contractor in the dietary department. One of my many daily jobs is taking items to different departments throughout the hospital. Ours is pretty damn big, and I think it might be the 3rd or 4th largest in my state. There's lots of corridors and elevators that are just for staff, and there's lots of them that don't get used much. Half the basement is underground and half is not. The hospital was built into a hill. The amount of times I've rounded a corner into one of those corridors or tunnels and there's a doctor or nurse or whatever doing stuff that they absolutely shouldn't be is wild. I've caught people doing the deed, I've caught a damn doctor shooting something up, I've caught the head of radiology hitting an effing smack pipe. I didn't see the pipe, but nothing in the world smells like that except smack. I've seen people passing money and med bottles to one another. I've seen nurses trying to bury their empty bottle of liquor in the waste bin closet. Everyone seems to be doing it with everyone somehow, and it's nuts how much of a crazy, racy smackden all hospitals are. And these folks are the ones who help us when we're hurt. Literally mind-blowing. And I've only been here 2 years. Restaurants. The vast majority of the cooks are not late-life fancy Anthony Bourdain, but early-life addicted hungover Anthony Bourdain. Also, yeah, I know that to people in the industry this isn't big news, but when my parents found this information out through my stories and others, they were literally shocked. I think the older generation still saw it as an artistic trade. So listen, the servers are all smoking Mary J, the line cooks are all alcoholics, the owner and manager probably does white snow or something, and there's usually one guy back of house, good odds it's the guy doing the dishes, who's on something really hard. Back in the early 90s I worked as a sous chef in a very upscale restaurant on Palm Beach.
If you were hungover or going slow and it was approaching time for service, the manager would tell you to go to the bathroom and get your head straight. On top of the back of the toilet, covered with a magazine, there were perpetually a couple of lines of white snow available anytime for any of the back-of-house staff. I only found out years later it was supplied by the owner of the restaurant, a very wealthy and well-known figure in Palm Beach society. It was a morale booster from him.
And this is surprising to literally nobody who works in the service industry. You're right. You've got to have some method of coasting through all that stress if you don't want to age 5 years in one like I did. Lawyers, doctors and nurses, chefs, cooks, waiters and waitresses, construction, truckers, and honestly a lot of people in power right now. We're talking presidential staff and representatives. Also, college professors, a lot of people in science and chemistry work right now. My wife is a chemist and 90% of her coworkers and managers have admitted to Adderall and white snow usage. Basically, any type of work that requires a lot of long hours, intense concentration, and the ability to be available at any given time. I'm not against the people who use these for reasons, honestly. It sucks, but they do what they have to do in order to survive, and to get the job done and not get replaced. I am, however, against the place we're at in the world where these people feel like this is the route they have to take in order to do what they are ordered to do so they can afford to survive and be a, quote, team player. You cannot expect your average person to work in high-stress jobs with high-stress hours and a high-stress work week schedule while also demonizing these people for doing and using whatever they can to be your ideal tool to use every waking hour of the day, and when they can't because the person you're using has tried to give up substances or never begun to use them and are burning out, they're tossed away like trash. It's sad. Military amphetamines, police, free reign on whatever, usually white snow. Healthcare is basically instant access to prescriptions. Lawyers are notorious white snow and poppers guys. Wall Street and finance, Wolf of Wall Street shenanigans. Teachers, it's just booze. Bankers, and I don't mean your average tellers, but your higher-up bankers do so much white snow and ketamine it's ridiculous. And these people handle your finances. The real answer is way more people use substances that are illegal or of dubious legality than we care to think. Much of it is socially acceptable, like herb smokers in states where it's not legal, so we tend to overlook it. I think the big surprises are the high-profile, high-intellect field. They're smart enough to know how to manage it and hide it, and especially utilize it appropriately. It's probably not a surprise for my field, but making games for a couple of decades, almost everyone's an alcoholic. To the point where we didn't even hide it at one studio where I worked at. There was a keg on wheels and you could nominate someone to park it next to their desk if they were on a roll. It wasn't just booze. That was just the part we didn't hide. We all drank professionally and accidentally made games along the way. We had a green herb balcony and a smack alley. If you work 20+ hours a day, constantly stressing your brain by pushing creative boundaries within production timeframes, you've just got to do what you can. But they were all still some of the smartest and creative and most professional people I've ever worked with. You'd never know Bill was off his rockers on benzos because he just checked in a shader change that could have its own GDC talk, or Mike just dropped a score that's about to get a Grammy after 30 straight hours of work with a keg literally a foot away from his chair. Then we all show up at 8 AM the next day, stable as a board, and we do it all again. Turns out everyone is doing stuff and drinking because our economic system is soul-sucking to the majority of us. Who would have guessed? Construction. Paving company employees doing my driveway were hitting the smack pipe on their brakes. I work big road projects and I've seen them fire the wing operator for being hungover. Like with most construction, the guys doing the huge government projects are generally tightly tested, paid well, and generally not into substances or only into alcohol on their off days. Gotta tell you, the US Special Forces are regularly involved in substance trafficking. Yeah, I've heard it's the same with the CIA. They've been funding illegal black operations that way since at least the 1980s and likely much earlier. Look up Gary Webb for God's sakes. Stay-at-home parents. Most of the mums in the neighborhood I grew up with would go through several bottles of wine a week and pop pills all day long. Adderall, Xanax, Ritalin, various opioids. A lot of them had older kids and cleaning services, so aside from making meals and shopping, there wasn't much else to do to pass the time. Doctors. I was a bartender in this real small dive bar, and this anesthesiologist would always be there. He'd arrive after his shift, it was always early afternoon, until closing, and would always talk about how early he'd have to get up. He'd claim 2 to 3 hours of sleep per night. He always had crazy meds in him and was always the life of the party. Everyone loved him. That guy was wild. If I ever have to get put under, I'm going to go to a different country because I fear he'll be treating me. Also, I'm noticing people commenting all have similar stories about male doctors. I'm curious what the substance situation is like for the females in the industry. Post office. It's so horrible here that we need to self-medicate. There should be a green herb booth and a self-deletion booth in every post office. Commercial fishing. And a lot of them end up taking a fatal amount as well because they'll go 2 to 3 months not using since they can't do it on the boat. Once they get back to harbor or home, they feel like they need to catch up. It's a pretty bad cycle and substances are everywhere in the industry. EMS in the United States. Medics doing lines on the way to calls and stuff. Anesthesiologists. I keep seeing this one and it makes me laugh every time because my cousin's an anesthesiologist and she's basically a frickin' nun. That had to be a shock to her system, meeting her co-workers. Are you all on the devil's lettuce? Illegal only in that they can't prescribe it to themselves, but my understanding is that anesthesiology has a disproportionate number of substance users. All of them. I've learned 2 things as an adult. First, cheese is prohibitively expensive, and second, everyone does white snow. I work at a country club, so there's 2 professions I've got for you that stand out. Attorneys and people in sales. The guy in sales who told you he worked from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and he's doing that every day, all day? That's not Red Bull. That's something else. Living in Japan as a foreigner. The hidden struggles of outsiders. I work with Japanese businesses, and the thing that infuriates me the most is that nobody will disagree with you in a meeting, even if you're wildly wrong and about to make a huge mistake, even if it will wreck their business, even if it's objectively a terrible idea. If you have a meeting coming up with 30 people in it, you need to have at least 30 one-on-ones ahead of time in order to get everyone's true thoughts, and you can't mention any other one-on-ones. If you say, oh, I met with Bob and he said XYZ, then you've just missed out on getting any kind of real opinion out of the one person you're meeting with. They'll shut down. They're terrified of disagreement. Someone told me Japanese companies have a role called the loud American whose specific task is to disagree with people publicly. I've always wondered if it's true because if it is, I find it very funny. Oh, it's true. I studied law in Japan, and one of my professor's jobs before working at my school was to be the American during mediations and negotiations. Apparently, many American-bought Japanese companies that were meeting with regular Japanese companies started to realize that people kept doing roundabouts during negotiations, which made meetings that should have been 1 hour take more than 3. Thus, Americans were being hired to be obnoxious and cut through the niceties. The Americans were told not to be rude, but to stop the talk and consideration. I've lived in Japan for 12 years and counting. Deep relationships are hard to come by. People don't often ask inquisitive questions for the sake of protecting someone's privacy. A big negative of that is that most relationships are very surface level. In addition to this, people usually don't hang out at each other's houses. All gatherings and meetings must be planned well in advance, and things feel more like events rather than casual get-togethers. Ultimately, the lack of deep connection where you really get to know people is hard. People are so good at putting an outward face on and covering up their true selves. Once I started dating there, I felt I was more engaged and invited to small gatherings and hangouts that weren't events. But it did take finding and meeting a partner and then helping being that medium for daily hangouts with other people beyond scheduled events. It's so futuristic in a way, but also so behind in everything bureaucratic or anything related to paperwork. No online systems, no chance to go in person, just mail. And God forbid you mail the wrong person or even the department. They'll mail back to do it again with the right addresses. It can be maddening. Yeah, I know some people who'd find the lack of in-person confrontation very ideal, at least on a surface level. It sounds very lonely, to be honest, even to a less socially inclined person like me. Japan is a duality in so many ways. If you live there for a while, the more superficial layer starts to chip away, and you start to see some really interesting things. I really try to look at it as not better or worse, just different, but that can be really hard at times. Japanese people are generally very respectful, kind, welcoming, polite, and interested in other cultures. Traveling there is safe, and it's refreshing to be treated so well by default, but under the surface there's deeply ingrained misogyny, racism, and ageism. It doesn't necessarily manifest in day-to-day interactions, but stay there long enough and you'll see its impact. For example, it's important in Japan for tea to be served to guests, but it doesn't matter how much authority a woman has. If she's the only woman around, she prepares the tea. I visited a company for work where the department head was a woman and her employees were all men. She prepared the tea. The only time a man served me tea was when there were literally no women around, and then it was the youngest man's job.
Racism usually manifests as a genuine curiosity, and if you look different, you can feel like a movie star. You will hear constant surprise that you can use chopsticks or speak even a word of Japanese, but that's pretty innocuous, if tiresome. But if you try to get a driver's license, open a bank account, get a job, or buy a car, you'll see the rampant systemic racism in action. Westerners also love the extremely punctual and efficient public transportation, perfect queuing, polite customer service, and general quietness in public spaces. But all of that comes from extremely rigid social standards. You will do a perfect job at work to make sure the trains are always on time, you will queue respectfully, you will be quiet. They have a saying that the nail that sticks up will be hammered down. Conformity to the group is mandatory, and if you wish to deviate, you have to do it in the accepted spaces. It results in bonkers artwork, wild after-work parties, crazy bedroom culture and stuff, because when they're allowed to let loose, they absolutely do. But it's very different from Western culture and can be a difficult trade-off. There's a lot more stuff like that, a kind of utopian service that visitors tend to appreciate, built on top of difficult or even dark concessions of freedom for the individual. The importance of personal freedom and liberty in all areas of life is what I grew to appreciate about America after living there for a long time. I still struggle with those trade-offs. For example, the US is so focused on individual liberty that we're basically fine with frequent massacres of our younger generations, and the grocery store is an absolute main character syndrome nightmare. I wish we could find a middle ground of mutual respect, but also fundamental importance of individual freedom. I work for a Japanese engineering company, and the bureaucracy is definitely something else. Also, it's considered rude to change someone else's design, so if something's wrong, you don't fix it, you basically put a new design on top of it that compensates for the error. Imagine the engineering design equivalent of painting over mold. Japan's a weird mix of being in 2050 while also being in 1950. So much stuff still requires physical paperwork, but most vending machines let you pay by NFC or debit card, and the trains are so damn efficient. As the saying goes, Japan has been in the year 2000 since 1980. The salary, even adjusted for cost of living, it's pretty low. Best year of my life, and I learned a lot, but man was it a pain to budget at times. That's why Nintendo made a Japan-only Switch 2 that's $345 compared to everywhere else with $449 and the current exchange rates, obviously. They thought their Japanese customers wouldn't be able to justify $500 on a Switch 2 because of how much lower salaries are. Makes perfect sense after seeing the crap show Sony created with the PlayStation 5 and Pro. Japan was roasting the heck out of Sony, along with anyone else outside the USA, for having the gall to charge almost $1,000 for a PlayStation 5 Pro with a disk drive. I'm going to say Japan doesn't protect a lot of basic civil rights very well. You can be discriminated against for disabilities in employment and even in healthcare choices. If you end up in a lawsuit, the court is extremely reluctant to make a judgment and will try to force an agreement even when the case should be clearly in favor of one side. If you're charged with the crime, you will be convicted. But not all crimes are charged. So if you're the victim of a crime and the police or prosecutor don't want to take the case to court, for fear of being in the tiny percentage that aren't convicted, the perpetrator will just go free. This explains Japan's very high statistic of people apparently self-deleting, because that's what they file deaths under when they can't prosecute a murder. An American friend of mine worked as an attorney in Japan. It drove him nuts that the first responsibility was to society and appearances above the interests of their client. They're too nice, meaning they're not honest, they won't say what's actually on their minds, and everyone appears as a mindless drone. In actuality, they're just trying to survive while being taken advantage of by a system that rewards servitude and not personality. There's this lady on TikTok that does a video series about what it's like being a foreigner in Japan. She's a teacher and she's gotten a summer job at one point. Apparently they made her apologize for leaving and tried to force her to stay, and apparently some companies will try to sabotage your next job. Also, there's an issue with women living on the first floor of an apartment building. I don't know if it's a regional thing or not, but dryers are not something that everyone had access to, so they hang their laundry, and the landlord warned her about young men stealing undies from her little patio if she was living on the first floor. It's such a weird country. I love the concept of Japan, but I have no idea how I'd feel living there. I've seen some videos of people owning shops with like a table of goods sitting outside their shop, saying they leave them out overnight with no fear of theft, because it's seen as dishonorable, so nobody steals. But then on the other side of the coin, undies get stolen from someone's patio. They've got top-class manners, but they've also got elite-level preverts. Maybe that's the ingrained gender bias thing we've mentioned earlier. Perhaps they've just interpreted this as sort of a boys being boys thing that isn't worth prosecuting, so people just kind of accept it. Pretty wild to me. Then again, it's the sort of thing we'd laugh off in a 90s hijinks movie.
You need to use transparent trash bags and you need to take them out at 6 a.m. You're not allowed to take them out the evening before. You're not allowed to use a trash can, but just have to haul out that disgusting transparent bag. And if you mess that up, you'll need to have the trash bag inside your house, waiting for you to get up early the next day. And the schedule is all over the place. And disclaimer, not all Japan is the same, but it is a known issue. In my town, we had to write our names on our transparent trash bags. One fateful garbage day, I forgot to write my name on mine, and that evening the garbage man knocked on my door to return my garbage to me. He explained that I hadn't written my name on it. Feeling clever, I replied, "Well, how do you know it's mine then?" "It has English things in it," he replied. My buddy is Vietnamese and grew up in Southern California and then moved to Japan for work. He always felt SoCal was a little racist, but it was nothing like Japan. In Japan, Vietnamese are often uneducated immigrant workers and are seen as the lowest class. My buddy's Japanese wasn't amazing, it was his third language, and he dressed like a California skater. He'd be refused service at restaurants, not be allowed into stores, and called boat trash. He eventually learned to dress in expensive suits and only speak English, playing up his Americanness. He still had an old woman ask, "Who taught a dummy like you English?" I lived in Japan for 2 years and I remember a local telling me that fair-skinned Japanese people looked down on dark-skinned Japanese people. Not all Japanese people are like that, I'm sure, but he said it was pretty common. Japan can do things 3 ways: amazingly well, antiquated, or absolutely weird and creepy. I've heard from friends that their online banking is just awful, and that many banks are completely defeated by the concept of middle names, which was a common thing among non-Japanese living in Japan way before these systems were even designed, which means they actively decided to ignore the needs of non-Japanese customers. But yeah, you sign up with your name, it doesn't accept the middle name, and then when you go to verify your ID, it doesn't fully match the documents because their systems didn't accept it, and now you need to start all over again and are probably flagged for potential fraud at that one bank. Well, all of these others are pretty accurate, I can say. Funny anecdote, I taught at a cram school a long time ago before getting a gig at a university. When I told the cram school owner that I was leaving, several months in advance by the way, she interrogated me over where I was going. I reluctantly told her about the university gig, and she scoffed at me and made some very rude, passive-aggressive comments about how people who work at universities have to be smart, but I guess they'll let any foreigner in. By the way, she was incredibly nice and friendly before this. The last 2 months I worked at that place were hell, to be honest, and I actually ended up leaving early. I want to clarify I'm a woman and I chose to move here long term, and overall I enjoy living here. I feel very safe and I have much better healthcare and quality of life in Japan than in the US where I'm from. I'm able to live comfortably in a major city, but I believe in order to enjoy your time here, you need to make cultural sacrifices. My personality in Japanese is totally different than in English. I put up with things that would send American women into a coma. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I lived in rural Japan for a year as an assistant language teacher. A downside that nobody's talked about so far? How about not treating roads or sidewalks in the winter? I didn't have a car, and I relied on getting around by bike and on foot. The first time it started melting and refreezing, it was a total crap show. Everything was covered in half an inch of ice. I fell over a lot, despite being Minnesotan. When I was in Sapporo one time, I took a taxi and was making small talk with the driver about how the roads were so icy. He assured me it was totally safe, and immediately after that, as he tried to stop at a red light, he wildly fishtailed back and forth due to the ice. We both laughed about that. Seriously though, for a country with so many elderly folk who could easily break a bone in a fall, I don't understand the logic behind this. Bonus fun fact, in small towns, folk are much more likely to smile, wave, and say hello. Nearly everyone, including at work, was also very accepting of my forearm tattoo. Here's a numbered list of my life here. First, I'm 6'3". I smack my head on doorways and those train bars at least once a day. I always check those entryways have got clearance. Second, taking off your shoes to enter office buildings and schools and having to carry around an extra pair of footwear because your feet are too big to fit the provided slippers. 3. Going to the dentist, they'll often take multiple sessions to fix one tooth, and sometimes the work is less than quality. 4th is the deer-in-the-headlights look Japanese get when interacting with you because you might be the only foreigner they've ever seen. It honestly must be like what being a celebrity's like without the rich part. I had a bunch of high school girls pretend to take an English class so they could sneak my picture and then run out of the school giggling. 5. The Japanese are hard to read by body language. I prided myself on being able to read people. That went out the window in Japan. They could literally be full of the fires of hell with their hatred for you and you'd never know.
Similarly, they might like you and ignore you until the day you leave and they get you a present. 6. Upsetting wah. As a big loud American, I thoroughly rupture the wah of my environment. 7. Gaslighting on the internet. See a video of Japanese going up the stairs in an orderly fashion on Reddit and every comment is, "Japanese are so orderly and polite." When in reality, if you were going up the stairs during rush hour, you'd better keep your head on a swivel as you'll be body checked into Bolivia. And finally, 8. Polite doesn't mean nice. Once again, polite doesn't mean nice. No, it does not. Ingrained manners does not mean that the person's intentions or opinions can't be bad. All of the soft-spoken little old white ladies I know who have etiquette out the wazoo, but are capable of nonetheless having horrific opinions, are living proof of that. As a black woman, being the product of mixed interest and racism, I joined dating apps when I first came here and matched with many Japanese men. However, 80% of them were either 1. Really into stereotypically black culture like hip-hop and reggae or soca, 2. Were generally rebellious, so they only dated black or non-Japanese girls because dating a black girl is the most rebellious thing one can do against one's family, apparently, and 3. Really wanted to try a black woman once, so they were just looking to hook up. These messages upon matching were typically things like, "Are you aggressive in bed?" or "I hear women from the Caribbean are really good in bed," or "Can you twerk/whine?" It was hard to distinguish who was like this because it was the most salaryman-looking guys who were the freaks. The worst, and the reason I stopped matching with Japanese men, was one guy I went on a date with who couldn't stop talking. On and on about how he loves black culture, the women, and asked me a million questions about the Caribbean, specifically Carnival, and the raunchy nature of it. That's not the worst part. We went driving around the city, and every chance he got, he'd try to touch my hair and remark on how it was wild and exciting. I think if you exist in a space that's a little exotic but still in the comfort zone, like I'm slim and not dark, which is things Asian men prefer, but I have huge natural hair so I'm still unambiguously black, Japanese men will put you in a very uncomfortable box. It's hard to meet a partner here because it's either a weird novelty to borderline preverts, or foreign guys who want to date Asian girls only. It's not my story, but a school friend of mine who was obsessed with Japan all his life basically achieved his dream and moved over there. He married a Japanese woman and got a job with Bandai Namco. After 10 years, he practically fled the country with his wife and had almost nothing but bad things to say. He said it was basically impossible to be truly accepted as a foreigner, the work culture is beyond insane, and the police and government have a frightening level of power. He highly recommends it as a holiday destination, but not to live. Bandai Namco, like many game companies, are notoriously horrible to work for, which is why they're always hiring for nearly every conceivable position and are constantly pumping money into recruitment agencies. Bandai Namco appears in nearly every single advertisement for multiple agencies. I'm sorry it sucked for your friend, but they've worked for a notoriously bad example. It might not just be Japan's fault. Most of the stuff is talked about a lot, so I don't know. There's the ridiculous work culture that emphasizes appearance of effort over results. There's the normalized cheating. I remember at work someone whose wife would only give him enough cash to buy lunch so he wouldn't spend it in exotic dance clubs. So he switched up his lifestyle, only ate cheap instant ramen, and created his own secret fund to go and see working girls. For my part, being on the receiving end of xenophobia and racism was a new experience for a Caucasian. And then there were the Byzantine trash collection rules. I saw someone else here saying underperforming executives for a Japanese country were sent to work for the US branch as a punishment. They loved how much more laid back everything was once they got here. My wife is Japanese. We don't live there, but we go very often and we stay with her family in Fukui for a month or so a year. Here are my picks. First, the really bizarre tradition about not complimenting other people's children for being cute. It's not a politeness or protection thing, but one of vanity. Everyone thinks everyone else's kids are ugly. I got made fun of for calling a kid cute. Even old women don't share pictures of their grandchildren with each other. Second, zero physical affection towards your own kids. No hugs, nothing. I have to refrain from hugging my own kid when there. Third, the cheating. Only 2 of my wife's 30 close friends are loyal to their husbands. Lawsuits for cheating spouses are a thing in Japan, which has a good number of my wife's friends either paying or receiving claims for adultery. 4, everything being covered in plastic despite draconian trash rules. And 5, worst of all, is the ineffective waxy or plastic napkins. I've lived in Japan for 4 years, and working in a Japanese company has given me 2 answers. First, the time zone is terrible. In summer, it's light before 4 a.m. and gets dark at 6 p.m. The whole country should move the clocks an hour back. And then there's the reverse culture shock.
When I go back to the UK, I sometimes catch myself thinking my friends and family are self-centered, loud, and can't read the air. By British standards, they're absolutely none of these things, but Japan's emphasis on harmony and indirect communication has started rubbing off on me. I'm worried this could get worse the longer I stay. That in many aspects where the Japanese seem way ahead of other countries, it's because they're comically behind everyone else in some other aspects. Japan didn't have the credit card culture North America and Europe have, so that's the reason Japanese cell phones got tap to pay in the late 90s. Those phones were linked to something like a PayPal account that had to be manually topped up in cash at a convenience store, so not as easy as it looked. The lack of credit cards also often meant paying in cash. Japanese people wanting first-class airline tickets thought nothing of going to a bank, withdrawing $15,000 in cash, and taking it to the nearest JAL office to buy tickets in person rather than online. Faxing may still live on in Japan, and if it's dead, it will be somewhat recent, let me tell you. It was also common for Japanese boxes to look at every fax that came in, so no making fun of your boss via fax. I know their IT is generally way behind the US. A few years ago, it wasn't uncommon to see Windows 98 in offices still. Okay, somewhat stereotypically, I kind of thought that at least in terms of their tech, they were more or less up to date or better, but this may be too many generalizations about the place in films and video games. We're often shown Japan as like a technological wonderland. Lesson learned there. Also, Windows 98. Coming here when you aren't young can leave you with few friend options outside of other foreigners. People aged 30 plus already have little time for their close friend group and aren't really looking to add new faces to the group. On top of that, most foreigners don't stick around too long, so Japanese people are hesitant to invest time into building any sort of meaningful friendship with you. So you try to make friends with other foreigners, but lo and behold, what those Japanese people were afraid of was right, and your foreigner friends leave one by one. If you're not an extremely outgoing person, you can find yourself very isolated rather quickly. Getting ghosted by an entire culture when you mess up one tiny social cue. My friend talked about how different the culture was there when he got back from the army. He says his biggest cultural issue was how indirect people were when they weren't happy with something you do. How judgmental people are. Judging how people dress or how they talk or what they look like. I don't care personally, but man, it's lame how much grown adults can't get out of a high school bully mindset. School kids spend all of their time at school and don't get to spend much time with their dads. My barber in Japan had a young son. Once he was telling me how his son was about to start school and he was having his last camping trip with him. I asked him why he couldn't do that in the school holidays. Apparently, kids go to school for 6 days of the week, and during the holidays they're expected to do school activities. He said his son would be tied up with school stuff until he graduated high school. Most landlords won't rent to foreigners. Most banks won't give you a credit card. Police can kidnap you for 2 weeks without having any proof in charge and won't let you contact anyone. Yen has dropped and salaries are stagnant. Glass ceiling for foreigners getting promotions to upper levels. Something that does come up, but I feel like most people don't internalize it, is just how xenophobic Japanese natives are. As a culture, they never really left behind the "we are beacons of civilization and everyone else is barbarians" mindset. Recently, there was an anime that blew up in a huge way. Super popular, super fast. Solo Leveling. It's based in South Korea. The Japanese version changes all of the names and locations to ones in Japan because the Japanese audience won't accept that it takes place in South Korea and that the main character is Korean and not Japanese. It'd be like if the American localization named the main character Stanley and they called all of the cities things like Dallas. Under $100, the life-changing upgrade that nobody told you about. 2 pet ducks. You might be tempted to go for one, but trust me, you need 2, and you'll have about $76 left over. Another monitor. Your productivity will increase dramatically. A nasal irrigation kit, either the electric pump or simply the squeeze bottles. I started using them both leading up to surgery on my sinuses and I haven't stopped using them since. It takes some getting used to, but the relief and clean feeling is amazing. AeroPress coffee maker. The thing broke my wife out of her $200 a month Starbucks habit. Thank God. The unit costs maybe $25 or so. Houseplants. They'll make you happy looking after them. I recently bought a Venus flytrap. She caught her first fly today. I'm so proud.
Oh, this is so wholesome I could die. I started keeping and growing plants and herbs, and just not killing them feels like such a huge accomplishment. Seeing a new sprout is like a celebration. Now I understand why people have graduations for kindergarten. New pair of socks. If you've been wearing the same pairs forever, like I typically used to, there's nothing like putting on a new pair of freshly bought socks. You can totally feel the difference. I never realized till I was an adult, sadly, but I appreciate the feeling of new socks all the time now. I bought a $1 back scratcher from an Asian market in town. Best $1 I ever spent. Back scratcher! Back scratcher here! My boyfriend came home from work one day raving about this back scratcher his boss had. I thought it was the dumbest thing. A few days later, he came home and said he found the same one at the gas station for $8. I rolled my eyes thinking, who needs a back scratcher for $8? It's the best thing ever. It looks like a little metal skeleton hand and it's extendable. Rice cooker. That mother fricker kept me fed during depression when I barely had the energy to get out of bed. Takes less than nothing to get some rice in there and flip the switch. Want something sweet? Throw coconut and sugar in there. Want flavor but can't be effed to make anything? Get some Spanish rice or saffron going. You can throw tofu in there if you need. Yeah, it's not the best for you, but hot food is better than no food. I can't help but feel resentment for the universe for necessitating me learning to cook rice well in a saucepan, which was frustrating and a process of trial and error. And then I learned there was a machine capable of making it perfectly every time freely available. A decent, light wake-up alarm clock. Completely changed my mornings. Don't think I could ever go back to using my phone or a simple alarm clock. If you have trouble getting up or functioning in the morning and you like a nice cup of coffee or tea, an electric kettle with a timer can be a real game changer. Or just getting an electric kettle if you don't have one. Vertical mouse. $20. Saved my wrist using it at work all day. It looks odd, but it feels so much more natural. I even got a bunch of people at my office to buy one after they tried mine. King-sized blanket for a queen-sized bed. I got a king for a double bed. Best decision ever. The double sheets fit the bed, but I couldn't snuggle completely under them without curling up. Now I can hide completely under the duvet stretched out. Best thing ever in the winter, and as a bonus, if I pull the covers completely over myself, the boogeyman can't even find me now. How about sharp knives for the kitchen? I put off buying a whetstone for a long time, mostly because I was nervous I'd use it wrong or ruin my knives. But it's not too hard at all if you get one with an angle guide. Makes chopping stuff up faster, easier, and safer. We bought a whetstone, what feels like years ago, and it went unused until last week. Everyone in the household is constantly complaining about dull knives, and I always tell them, well, we do have a whetstone, to which they respond, I don't know how to use that. Eventually, the dullness started to actually bother me, so I spent 30 seconds watching a YouTube video and I gave it a crack. Then I learned it had been bothering me my whole life, and I just didn't know it. Knives are supposed to cut that easily? Holy crap! A glass breaker on a keychain. Push it against the glass of your car window and it shatters immediately, helping you get out of your car underwater or if there's a broken door or something. Super cheap and life-saving. In my opinion, definitely a weighted blanket. If you have a hard time sleeping at night or you have anxiety, they have some at Target for $25 currently. Something else that really helped me with sleeping is a bottle that keeps water cold, like a Mizu or whatever. Being able to drink ice-cold water at any time of the night without leaving your bed changes everything. How do you not have to pee all night? I force myself to stop water intake by 8 p.m. because I end up peeing twice a night even with my water curfew. You need a nice water bottle and a good-sized pee jar for your nightstand. Try not to confuse them though. Motion sensor night lights. Can't tell you how many stubbed toes or falls they've prevented. Also, a cheap intruder alarm. Carbon monoxide detector. More than one 10mm socket. Oh, excuse me while I cry 1/7/16 of an inch at a time. Blackout curtains for your bedroom. Changes your life if you want to sleep all day. I refuse to have them in my room after living like a vampire for a few years. Combine it with a wake-up light alarm clock. Block the sun, then emulate its rise. The future is here, people. It may sound simple, but a good pillow. It's amazing the change in body aches and sleep you see when you have a good pillow that just fits you. I thought that I liked memory foam and other fancy pillows, but the real life changer for me was a buckwheat pillow. I have sleep apnea, and it allows me to get my head into the perfect position and keep it there comfortably. Before you go out and buy one yourself, please research different pillow pros and cons. Buckwheats aren't for everyone. Sunscreen. No cancer for this guy. For anyone that disagrees with this comment, I've had multiple skin cancer surgeries. It's not the scalpel cutting away the flesh from your body that hurts the most during the procedure, it's whatever liquid they inject into you to deaden the nerves around the cancer that hurts. The needles don't hurt, but that crap they inject into you is frickin' nasty. Wear your sunscreen, kids. An air compressor to air up your tires. Got one off Amazon for $30. A 10-foot charging cable. or a quality pair of shoes. National Park Annual Pass. And if you're a veteran with any percentage of disability rating, they're free for life. If you have a large lawn or a property that requires a lot of yard work, get some 3M work tunes. About $50 and they're a combination of hearing protection and Bluetooth headphones, so you can actually hear your music without destroying your eardrums. They're a good gift for anyone you know with a lawn or wood shop or something. At my old house, it was a 4 to 5 hour ordeal to mow and trim the property. I'd likely have gone fully insane without those. Fitted sheet straps. They keep cheap sheets from popping up at the corners, so now I can use soft sheets that don't cost a fortune and my sleep is undisturbed by them popping loose, greatly improving my quality of life. A good shop vac. You will not believe how many uses around the house you'll find for it. Cobweb removal, water removal, gravel removal, vent cleaning, soot trap cleaning, after a good scrub since it's likely dirty from the other tasks, car vacuuming, dust sucking, the list goes on. Seriously, if you plan to buy or already own a home, go get a shop vac. Basic skincare routine. I'm talking like cleansing, moisturizing, sunscreen, and if you're really adventurous or in need, get yourself a topical for acne or concerns. Amazing for your self-esteem and also becomes a real form of self-care eventually. It's so easy to forget to take care of yourself. Step 1. Throw away all your socks. Step 2. Buy 3 to 5 packages of the same sock. Step 3. Enjoy a life without ever having to match socks again. But I can't deprive the world of my many diverse, colorful, and incredibly tacky animal or food print socks. Have fun with your beige lifestyle, you simps of mediocrity. First aid kit. Similarly, a fire extinguisher. Okay, maybe this isn't for everyone, but a pressure cooker. You can get one for around $100, and it can easily cook a genuinely staggering variety of food and cook it well. Whew, these answers I'm getting. Today I learned there are 3 types of people that use pressure cookers. People who use them to cook food, people who use it to sterilize things, and last but not least, people who use them to make bombs. The more you know. An electric kettle. I'm American. As a UK citizen, a kettle is on par with actually having food in the house. A dash cam for your car can protect you from wrongful claims, also vandalisms and theft. I got one, although I've never been in an accident before, knock on wood. The peace of mind that it gives me to know that I have backup evidence of anything of that sort for future issues is calming. Best $50 spent in the last 30 days. I've had one for a few years. Finally paid off when a guy backed into me at full throttle while we were waiting at a red light. Without it, I'm sure I would have been blamed for rear-ending him. A good showerhead. I can't stress enough how a high-quality showerhead can turn getting clean into an utterly zen 30-minute self-healing and relaxation session. Okay, clarification, I don't shower for 30 minutes every day, people. Modern rain showerheads use very little water, and I only have about 15 minutes to get ready in the morning, so this is a rare treat I let myself do once or twice a month. 24-year-old male here. I bought a book online about SQL for like $25, and then a course on Udemy for like $11.95, but I went from a job earning from $35K to $55K because I took time to learn a new skill. And if I end up staying and becoming a higher-level analyst, salary is around $70 to $75K. And look, maybe data analysis isn't your gig, but learning a skill can be cheap in terms of money. More time-consuming than anything else, but worthwhile. A good chef's knife and a cast-iron skillet. When you have the tools that are satisfying to use, cooking becomes less of a chore and more of a hobby. You'll end up eating healthier or cheaper or both than takeout or restaurant, and ditching the dull Walmart knife and scratched-up nonstick aluminium skillet is the best place to start. Alright, since so many are asking what to get, Victorinox 8-inch or 10-inch chef's knife and a 10-inch Lodge cast-iron skillet. Those are, in my opinion, the tippy top of the curve on quality-to-price ratio. These probably leave enough room in the budget to get a $2 steel from Goodwill and a large butcher block chopping board. As long as you use the steel with some regularity, a good knife should go a long time before it actually needs to be sharpened. Second edit, I agree that a good sharpener is important, but if you have $100 to spend today, you can wait on a sharpener as long as you have a steel to maintain the edge. You will need one, but not today. Also, I'm going to take another look at carbon steel skillets. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? A hammock. Bought my Eno a year ago and I have no idea what I'd do without it. You can literally post up anywhere and everywhere and it will encourage you to go outside a lot more. An electric toothbrush. So true. I've been using one for years, so I don't even remember how big the difference was. But recently, I convinced my boyfriend to buy himself one, and he was like, "What the frick? My teeth never felt so brushed."
A solid-state drive. SSDs are a gift from God. A used instrument. A passport, although it depends where in the world you are. Where I am, it's less than the equivalent of $100. Silk pillowcase. I got a silk pillowcase because I have really, really long hair, like down to my butt, and it keeps it from tangling as badly overnight. A cookbook. Not like a fad celebrity book, but a real old-school family cookbook. Best one I ever found was at a garage sale, and it was like a 6-inch thick ring binder full to the brim with yellow pages, some with stains. It honestly should have been a family treasure, and I got it for $20. Hundreds of family recipes with easy-to-follow handwritten notes. I'm sad I never met the grandma that this thing once belonged to. As a Canadian, it's really upsetting to hear about all the things that can supposedly be had for $100 in other places. Oh. Meat thermometer. No more cutting open meat to see if it's done, thus leaking the juices. A good everyday carry pocket knife. I use mine several times a day. Carbon monoxide alarm. Please get one, people. A slow cooker, a Kindle or library card, a juicer or blender, and a donation to adopt a pet from an animal shelter. Also, a printer. A kitchen scale. It completely changed my food consumption since I could easily measure portions. I learned what they actually should be, not what we in the US act like they are. That plus MyFitnessPal, the free version even, equaled me losing 120 pounds over 18 months and developing a much healthier relationship with food and eating. Very simple tools, but great for enacting real, lasting change. A folding wagon. Getting groceries into the house or camping gear and stuff. We always have our wagon in the car, and it will turn what would have been 5 trips back and forth into 1. A tongue scraper. Just a cheap desk for your laptop. Seriously, using it on a bed or somewhere else isn't as great as it is on a desk. Also, a comfortable chair, eventually. Books. Knowledge is currency that only increases. Okay, I bought the Twilight series and all of Sean Hannity's books. Let's get to work. Okay, well this person's definitely trolling us, but I do have to wonder what kind of person would be super into Sean Hannity and yet still be on board with this vampire series so maligned by the conservative American Christian organizations. What does that horrifying hybrid look like? Upgraded my box spring, pillow, and purchased a sound machine before lockdown. I've had more solid sleep and I'm having quite more pleasant days. I live with anxiety and PTSD, and I'm a green herb user. Medically and proper channels, of course. As a father of 3, with the 4th one on the way, life is simply compounding with interior place issues. After I upgraded my box spring and pillow, I purchased a sound machine. To be honest, each of those 3 things will elevate your sleeping and alter your days to come, not to mention the medical benefits. And to clarify, each of these things are separately under $100. Prescription contact lenses. A rice cooker. My mum always said that having one-use appliances was a waste of money and space, and as an adult now I generally agree. No quesadilla makers or donut or cake pop machines and stuff. I spent almost 10 years of my adult life boiling rice on a stove and oftentimes messing it up. It should be simple, but for me it just isn't. I bought a rice cooker on sale and oh boy, life has changed, people. It's even got a steamer basket, so it's not even technically a one-use appliance. Perfect rice every time, and you can set it and forget it until it's time to eat. Freeze up a stove burner, and meals where I cook rice now feel a lot easier. I'm willing to die on this hill. A collar that you can put ice cubes in to help keep you cool. I do a decent amount outside and digging jobs, and this thing probably saved me from a heat stroke. And it's only $20. The right shampoo and conditioner. I guess I should mention I'm a guy. I use this super girly looking stuff called Love, Beauty and Planet, and my hair is glorious and I love putting my hands into it. And other people like putting their hands in my hair too, generally women. Female marketed products are vastly superior in so many ways, and guys won't buy them because they're forced into the men's marketed section with bears and wolves and trees that represent crappy college-smelling products that are 12-in-1 body, hair, dish, clothes and car wash. Hair is hair, people. Choose the products marketed towards people who give a crap about their hair. Be the beautiful man you were meant to be. One of the male-marketed products that's superior, though, is men's razors. I know women that swear by men's razors, both because they're higher quality and lower in price.
A pull-up bar. If you have no upper body strength, begin with negative reps. Stand on a chair or stool, and get in pull-up position from the standing position, or jump into a pull-up position where your chin is above the bar. Then slowly lower yourself down. Continue to do these. Even better, use a resistance band to help spring you up during the rep. Start with stronger or multiple bands and progressively reduce the resistance. Eventually, you'll be able to do body weight pull-ups. Then it becomes the fun part when you add weight. A good pair of shoes. I bought 8 meals as meal preps for $96 for someone. It helped them through a hard time and provided hope. They just got their own place now and can comfortably afford all of their meals on their own. Paprika recipe app and the corresponding software for your PC. The thing is a miracle. Not only can you download recipes from websites, it pulls the recipe and instructions right out and leaves all the chaff. You know, the part where they tell you their life story and how their grandmother always told them when they made this apple pie that it reminded her of the time that blah blah blah. But you can also add ingredients to your grocery list right from the recipe, create meal plans and menus, and share access with other people. They have to buy the app too and use the shared login. It's changed the way I meal plan, shop, and cook. Instant Pot. Seriously, I love my Instant Pot more than I loved my first slow cooker. It changed summer cooking for me forever. I use it mainly for casseroles, chili, rice, and pasta dishes. It gets so hot in here that it's nice not to turn on the oven. YouTube wants you to think the answer is YouTube Premium. Screw Google for pushing that YouTube Premium so hard. They're so aggressive about it that I'll never even consider getting it just out of spite. A Brita filter water pitcher and reusable bottles. I cut out most drinks aside from water back in October, and we were going through more than 2 cases a week. It was expensive, heavy, took up way too much space, and was such a waste of plastic. I ended up buying a Brita pitcher from Walmart for about $18. We fill it up 2 or 3 times a day, and everyone has their own bottle now. When quarantine started and nobody could find bottled water, we were all good. There were so many positives to buying the Brita pitcher that I wish I'd bought it years ago. A used greenhouse. Growing plants in a greenhouse is one of the most rewarding things ever. You can raise so many amazing plants in there, and working in the garden is great for your mental health. It probably saved my life. Caring for plants and making them thrive gives me purpose. Great stuff. You know, folks, this might be my favorite answer. I'd never even thought about it, but I guess with any measure of care, you can probably get greenhouses these days that are relatively easy to put up and take down, and there are for sure other people who buy one in a fit of inspiration and then give up the hobby. A psoas. Many people aren't aware of the psoas muscle and its role in tying the body together. A great deal of lower back and glute and hamstring pain stems from a tight psoas, as well as a pain in the abdomen, upper back, the list just goes on. The psoas is a muscle that runs through the core, tying the hips to the upper abdomen, making it the literal crossroads of the body. A psoas is expensive for a seemingly easy-to-recreate piece of plastic, but my god, I've been involved in athletics my entire life, bodybuilding and powerlifting since I was 18. I'm now 26, and I'm a big fan of stretching, rolling, and using lacrosse balls on my back and feet. When my roommate ordered it and it came in, he told me to lay on it as low and close to my hips as I could and breathe. Slowly at first, I lowered my psoas onto this monster to immediate pain as a lifetime of use, overuse, and outright neglect were all suddenly addressed. Pain, and then it got easy. So I went a little further. Pain, and then it got easy. So I went a little further. In a matter of maybe 3 minutes, I literally felt like a changed man. I cannot recommend it enough. We bought it on vacation and let our friends try it, and the reviews were all the same. This sucks, it hurts more, haha, this is crap. Oh wow, my back doesn't hurt anymore. It's an actual lifesaver. Your first mechanical keyboard, but the second one will be over $100, I promise. You see, I bought mine for home and I didn't notice much of a difference, but when I had to use my non-mechanical office keyboard, it felt like garbage. The keys are so much less mushy on a mechanical keyboard. A real lava lamp, not that glitter lamp bullcrap. It's honestly such a stress reliever to have those balls of wax bouncing around as you try to fall asleep. Turn that thing on and my brain just knows it's Zen time. The worst crimes these people admit to, and how they escaped. When I was 12, I walked into a large, shall we say, Target-like store with my brother, grabbed the nicest bike we could find and walked it up to customer service and asked to return the bike my brother got for his birthday. They asked if we had a receipt, to which we replied no. They apologized and said we needed to go home and get the receipt before we could return it. We asked if we were going to be able to leave the store with the bike if we didn't have the receipt, and in response they called security over to escort us safely out with the bike.
It was too easy. When I was 18, I'm 32 now, I got arrested for shoplifting at a hardware store. I was at a dark point in my life. Broke, I needed money, so I was taking things to return later for cash. They let you do that at the time without a receipt. I got caught stuffing items behind my belt by an off-duty cop who was in the aisle next to me looking through the cracks. As I walked out of the store, security nabbed me and more cops came. Cops had me standing with my hands on the table by the main entrance while they talked to the manager. They'd already discovered about $40 worth of items I'd taken, but when they were asking me to unload the items, I unloaded all but one. A $200 thermostat or something. As I was standing there at the table with the whole store watching me from behind, I very discreetly reached over and pulled it out of my belt, stuck it between my thighs, and wiggled it slowly down my legs all the way to my feet, and just kicked it off to the side. Somehow nobody saw it. That little feat was the difference between a Class C misdemeanor, theft under $50, and a Class B, which is a difference of about $2,000 in fines and up to 6 months of jail time. Not to mention lawyer fees. Spent a few hours in city jail, got bailed out by my girlfriend, and it never went on my record. This one's a little bigger than the stole a pack of gum posts. Am I proud I got away with it? A little, yeah. Would I have been screwed if I'd been caught? Yeah. I was enrolled at a university and I worked for them as well. A benefit of employment was they paid my tuition. Everything was great for about a year and a half, and then boom! The area I worked in at the university was bought by an outside organization. Luckily for me, the school agreed to grandfather me in and continue to offer me free tuition. However, the paperwork had to be done differently. Instead of just applying tuition costs to the accounting books for an employee, they now had to have the school invoice or bill the tuition to me. I'd submit the invoice to administration and they'd cut me a check, and then I used the check to pay the bill. Well, this one time before a spring semester, I decided that I wanted to pursue something that wouldn't allow me to continue my education for some time, so I took it off. At the same time, I was living by myself and finances were really tight. I got into some major credit card debt, you see. So I concocted a plan to forge an old fall invoice from my school. The school's invoice was very basic because they created it specifically for the employee and students in my department. A simple Word doc. I simply changed the dates and submitted it. A few weeks later, I've got a check from the school for $3,000. Instead of using it to pay the university for classes that I never took, I used it to live on for the next few months. Holy crap, that is for sure something you could have been completely screwed if they caught you out in. Like the shoplifter before you also mentioned, paying the money back plus the fines and whatever lawyer's fees you might have needed would not have helped your situation at all, I imagine. Me and 3 buddies were pulling a senior prank in high school. We snuck out of the parking lot and were removing all of the license plates from the underclassmen and administrators' cars. Our plan was to take everybody's license plate off except for the seniors and throw all of the rest in a pile in front of the lot. We were doing pretty well when one of the basketball coaches happened to walk out and see heads bobbing between cars. I heard him scream and I dove under a truck. All 3 of my buddies got caught and had to spend 2 weeks in alternative school while I got away scot-free. That was the beginning and end of my criminal career.
If you truly were a mastermind, you would have waited until everything quieted down and your friends had been caught, then continued the prank. They'd never have known, and your friends could have even had the chance to say they had nothing to do with it, depending on the circumstances.
I once broke someone's jaw in a drunken fight. The sound that it made still haunts me to this day. I fled the scene, and I've never faced any legal consequences. However, I did see a grainy CCTV photo of myself in the paper the next week. I'm in no way proud of what I did or the fact that I got away with it, but you can't change the past. I had a high school teacher who boasted about always catching students when they tried to toilet paper or vandalize his house. I succeeded in coating his entire front lawn with driveway sealer.
That just seems like a recipe to get pranked in a massive way like that.
Oh crap, I forgot. Once I put baloney all over the car of a woman my dad was having an affair with, which my mum and sister asked me to do. Later that week, my mum and dad went over to her house to confront the lady that this affair had to be over and that he needed to choose who he wanted to be with. Somehow my dad got drunk over there and left them both at her house, so my dad's mistress had to drive my mum home in the polka dot baloney station wagon. I was about 7 years old and I had my first pocket knife. I got this knife from my grandpa. This, however, has nothing to do with my story. Me and my best friend Karen at the time were outside playing in the early winter in northern Germany. It gets dark at around 5 or 6 p.m. and we were still outside, since we had holidays. Anyway, we were so bored and we decided to do something. I'm the mastermind of our criminal duo and wanted to do some of the bad things. Karen was just the really cute girl and my best friend at the time. So we went around the block to the pub where all the bicycles stood outside while the owners of the bicycles were inside the pub drinking. I took out my pocket knife and put it into the first tire of the bicycle. What a wonderful sound. I stabbed every bike in the bike parking lot and took Karen with me, and we ran as fast as we could. To this day, I think it's in the top 3 of the unsolved mysteries in Germany, the tire/problem from 1996. I'm sure this is some sort of crime. Apologies in advance for this being long. We have a big outdoor music festival here that's in a large park downtown. They also shut down the streets around it as well as use the civic center right by the park. When I was 17, we went, like me and my then girlfriend, did every year. Well, it was the last day of the event and it was coming to an end on Sunday night. As we were sitting in front of the stage for one of the last acts, I got the ever so dreadful churning and gargling in my stomach that I always know is going to end in diarrhea. The porta potties are about a football field away and they always had long lines, so I decided to tough it out since I was about to head home. It progressed further to the point that I was starting to sweat and I was getting sharp pains as we began packing up and walking out. I have to walk about 4 blocks over to a parking garage where I and they, meaning her family, were parked. So we got there. I'm clinching, trying to hold it together, and she's doing the usual drawn-out teenage goodbye, which feels like eternity. Finally, she leaves, and I head up to the middle deck to my car, about 3 floors up, as they were on the bottom. As I walk toward my car, she calls my phone and informs me that she has my keys still. They were in her purse, and to come back down and get them. Now, at this point, it has rapidly progressed to the point where I'm penguin walking around this garage parking, about to lose the good fight. I go back down and get my keys, she draws out the I love yous again, I'll miss you, blah blah blah, and I'm about to just run away. She finally leaves and I think maybe I can get back in and just hold it till I get to the porta potty. Nope, no dice. Since the event was over, they wouldn't let anyone back in. I make it all the way back to the garage, dripping buckets of sweat, having to stop every 10 feet or so to clinch and wait for the temporary all clear. There are no public elevators in this garage, so I'm between floors in the stairwell, and then it's game time. Nothing could hold it back. It was as if someone had kicked me in my swollen, diuretic stomach. I flung my pants and boxers off and the most horrible, chunky liquid spews forth. There was so much of it that it started running down the stairs, and all of a sudden I hear of the door on the bottom floor, 2 flights of stairs below me. I quickly wipe my bottom with my boxers and throw my pants back on, and as I'm entering my floor's door, I hear, "Oh my freaking god, oh my god, oh my god, what the frick?" I hop in my car and I take off. Flash forward to the next day, we're sitting around watching TV and they run a news story about the event. Apparently the door I lost it at was also the floor that has the entrance to the mayor's office. They're looking for the vandals and there may be a reward for any information. At this point, being 17, I'm freaking out and thinking, what if the cameras saw me? What if they saw my car and start questioning people? What if they DNA test the brown matter? My girlfriend is utterly disgusted at the story and thinks people like that should have to be put down. A few days later, I get a call from the police department that I need to come down to the station. I'm, of course, freaking out. I immediately turn pale white according to my mum. We make it down to the station, and I'm at the point of being in tears thinking I'm going to jail. Turns out they'd recovered my stolen car stereo that was taken a few months back. They just needed me to sign off on it. Why have the cops got to call everyone like this in such an ominous manner? It seems like they could have said what this was about. Or maybe that's a way they have of getting everyone in, innocent or suspect, by refusing to discuss the purpose of the visit, good or bad. Keeps us all on our toes, I guess. Over the last 3 years, I've made about £30,000 blackmailing preverts who approach people of inappropriate age in online chat rooms. F's given, 0. I stole almost 80 lawn gnomes in 1 week. I steal towels every time I go to Lifetime Fitness. Probably 2 towels every time. So far, I've got about 52 towels. I have no need for any of them, I just like having extra towels. Also, in high school, I'd take $5 from the school store register when I worked there. I used to work in a Target where I'd take and eat pies all along. I'm a klepto and I have a problem. My husband uses his pocket knife to cut big stalks off the broccoli in the store, so he only pays for the bit we eat. And I let him, so I guess I'm an accessory. I once stole $16 in change over the course of 2 weeks to pay for a RuneScape membership. Busted. Bake 'em away, toys. Yeah. I once stole $30 worth of candy at an amusement park. It was the best Snickers bar I've ever had. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Stealing over $2,000 in books, including a moral philosophy book. I should clarify, I'm actually very opposed to theft despite my corrupt past. When you steal, you think you're stealing from the big mean corporations, but you're really not. You see, they have ways of protecting their costs by socializing their losses, like blaming it on the lowest worker on the ladder, and the person who's in charge of inventory will get their butt handed to them. A friend of mine was a cashier at her campus bookstore and was friends with the inventory person and some people who stole books. When that time of semester nears, the inventory person routinely gets nervous because they have to be the mean guy stopping theft. When you're struggling for money and dealing with classes, you don't want to bear that burden as well. After one particularly big steal, my friend's friend broke down and cried because she thought she was going to be fired. She didn't, but it often comes out of her pocket when she can't do her job. After that, my friend tried to tell her stealing friends that what they did wasn't cool, but they were angsty college freshmen and couldn't have it, so she distanced herself from these buttholes. Please, think about what you do before you stick it to the man. Oh, and that moral philosophy book was Theory of Justice by John Rawls. It's a good read, I recommend it. When I was a kid, I had a fascination with fire and explosives, and I built a lot of little firecracker things. Rocket engines, stole black powder from my dad and whatnot. When I was 19, I had a really bright idea. I got a CO2 cartridge, emptied it, filled it with gunpowder, put in a long fuse, and then put that inside a 20-ounce Mountain Dew bottle full of gasoline. I put a cigarette on the end of the fuse to act as a delay. A friend and I cruised around downtown looking for somewhere to put this thing. We came across a really old van at the end of a quiet street with no houses nearby for quite a ways. It was a really run-down, abandoned area, and I knew nobody would be near. So I put this thing on the front passenger seat, lit the cigarette, and we got in the car and took off again. We drove down the freeway for a while, turned around, and came back to find the entire highway covered in thick, black smoke. We got close to the area, and I peered over the edge of the bridge. It seemed like my design had worked. The inner charge first turned the gas into a mist, and then ignited it, pushing everything out, turning the whole van into one big engine cylinder. The hood was laying 15 feet away, the windows were all blown out, and the van was on fire from bumper to bumper. We got out of there, drove up to the bluffs where we could see it. We watched a whole lot of firefighters work on this van for the better part of an hour. It was quite an adrenaline rush. I made the mistake of telling a couple of friends about it, people I definitely shouldn't have trusted. Not long after that, they and I got into a disagreement about something, and the next thing I know, I'm on the phone with the police. They want me and my girlfriend to come down to the station to talk. So we go to the police station. They'd received a tip that I was the one who set the fire. They questioned my girlfriend and I for 4 hours. Eventually, they mentioned a detective who was a longtime friend of the family who told them I'd always had an interest in bomb making and such. I confessed. The cops came to my apartment and turned the place upside down. They ended up finding a couple of bottle rockets, a few shotty shells, and a book on military history. I'd been tipped off a day prior that was coming, so I took everything in my place remotely bomb-related and put it in a trash can and dumped it in a porta potty 2 counties away. They brought me back to the police station for more questions. They asked me why I'd chosen this particular van. I said it was because it was clearly abandoned and nobody was around for a long ways. They said, "So you didn't intend to hurt anyone with this thing?" I said, "No, of course not. I just wanted to see what it would do." They told me they weren't able to locate the owner of the van and that it had previously been appraised at $50. They told me to go home, stay put, and expect a phone call. That was 14 years ago. I'm still waiting for the phone call. In short, I blew up a van with a homemade bomb. Saved by the bureaucratic incompetence. Congratulations, and if I did any of these, it would probably have been this one growing up. God, some of us are dumb little pyromaniacs as kids. When I was 14, some kids pulled a knife on me and took my bike. The bike was worth just under $1,000. At the time I was with 2 friends, all of us on bikes. Another guy tried to take both of the other bikes and also had a knife. So it's 3v2. 3 unarmed 14-year-old kids and 2 guys who I assumed were around 20, both with knives. I let the guys take my bike because screw it, I'm a little kid and I don't want to get shanked. I was scared and so I pretty much bailed. One of my other friends did the same, but the last of us tried to fight. The fighter got slashed in the face and hand. He's now blind in one eye but has all of his fingers and his hand works fine, just a scar. Before you ask, it was my brother's bike. I was only going close to home so he let me ride it. There's no way I could have such a bike at 14. So this happened, yeah. The three of us were left trying to figure out what the frick to do whilst my friend's face was frickin' hanging off. I mean, we were all 14, so pretty much crapping our pants already, but I almost passed out at his face and I was sick in the gutter. I can honestly say we thought he was going to die. I've never been in such a messed up situation in my life. So my friends stay while I go to look for help. I knock at the first house, it's dark, and some old guy told me to go away. I guess he thought I was just a dumb kid babbling and crying, so whatever. He was a selfish jerk and he didn't help. I went to the next door neighbor and one of the automatic lights came on outside the door. So that's the first time I see that I'm frickin' covered in blood on my hands and arms, from where I wiped my tears and mouth from throw up. So this woman just stares at me in shock and calls her husband. All of her kids come out and start crying too. I couldn't even imagine such a cluster F, but eventually the dad got me talking clear enough for him to understand, and the cops got called. We all run back to the road where it happened, and a guy with his dog had already stopped to see what the frick happened. He didn't have a salvo, so it was glad the family had the police on the way. One frickin' police car arrived, despite me telling them that a 14-year-old was frickin' dying. A few moments later, a paramedic's car and an ambulance. Once the police established that this was very frickin' real, everything got real busy fast. They had the helicopter up looking for the guys, and a bunch more ambulances came to check us for injuries. The street was all closed off for forensic stuff, and I couldn't count all of the blue lights from police and medics. So yeah, my friend survived and we stayed friends. Got new bikes and moved on. I never forgot about it and it messed me up pretty bad for a while being paranoid at all times and scared to go out with anything even slightly expensive like a phone or watch. Then, 2 years later, I'm on a train going to an interview for college and my brother's bike is right there in the bike compartment. He had a bunch of different custom parts, so the bike was pretty unique, and I knew for a fact it was the one, but I didn't know what the frick to do. I just sat looking at it, but I didn't have a cell on me to call anybody. The guy came and took the bike off the train and got off at the next stop. I thought I'd do something, so I got off the train after him and tried to follow. I didn't really think about it though, because hey, bikes are faster than feet. So he rode off, but I knew which way he went out of the station. So for that night, I'm thinking how frickin' dumb I was to let it go. That could be the guy who cut up my friend and now he's gone. Frickin' idiot, I just wanted to beat myself up. But I decided to check every day for him. I took the same train every time for 4 or 5 days and waited around the station for about half an hour with a cell phone this time. Eventually, I saw it and followed on my bike. So now, I know where he lives and where he travels properly, but still no idea if this is the exact guy. Perhaps he just bought it on eBay or something. I told my brother and he told the police. The police said they couldn't positively ID it because we had no photos or receipts for the bike parts, and we didn't record the serial number or stamp on the bottom. So I'm angry as F that we can't have it back, and we can't find who was responsible because, hey, it was 2 years ago and the police have bigger things to do now. So I followed the guy over and over just thinking what to do. Then one time he goes home and I'd usually go to a shop nearby and then take the train back. As I'm walking back with a soda, he comes from the house with 4 other guys, and one of them is the other guy who helped him rob us of our bikes. I don't know who the 2 extra guys were, but just other friends, I guess. But for sure I know it's the guy who took my bike, and more importantly, the guy who took my friend's eye. So I tell the police again, and again I know it's them, and I ask my friend if he can ID him, and he says yes. But the police don't care now. It's too old and they can't trust a 16-year-old kid to positively ID someone from 2 years ago, even with the bikes. Frickin' bullcrap. I'm so angry at the police for not helping more. So me and my friends take my dad's truck this time. I'm 17 by now, and we stopped until I could see him again come from the house. It took a few days, but then my friend says, yep, that's him, and I frickin' knew 100% anyway, so now we both have an ID on this guy. So we followed him around. We found his car and his house, and one day did a hit and run on his car when he stopped. We just nudged the side of his car, so he chased us to pay for the damage. We stopped on a quiet road eventually and pretended to be sorry and, oh, I didn't see you, and then we just frickin' beat the crap out of him. My friend wanted to end him, being totally serious about it, but that was too much for me. I stopped him when the guy was beaten badly enough, and well, we didn't feel any better, I can tell you. We just left him there on the road and went home. I was scared for a while that maybe he had died and we'd be in jail forever, but then we found the report in the news that he was in a coma. He eventually woke up and he's in a wheelchair forever. I think he has brain damage forever, but I don't know. In short, a guy took my friend's bike and slashed him in the face and he's blind in one eye. 2 years later, we found the guy and beat him into a coma, and now he's disabled. Mine's still in the planning phase. I'll let you know how it goes. Normal day? Think again. The weirdest plot twists people swear they've witnessed. I'm a radiologist. One day reporting, I pull up a CT of a 30-something-year-old who had abdominal pain. Specifically, they said they felt tension and then a distinct popping sensation with a sharp pain, and then a vague but moderately severe ache that persisted. So, I'm looking for the usual suspects in this sort of presentation. Appendicitis, diverticulitis, maybe epiploic appendicitis, or inflammatory bowel disease. Found a foreign body in the small bowel. It looked odd on single slices, so I reformatted the image set in 3D. Found a bread bag clip. You know those little particular pieces of plastic to keep the bags closed. Interestingly, I found another one about 6 years later. My 2 cases constitute about 5% of all cases ever reported worldwide. On vacation in London, my wife and I were waiting for a train in a tube station. 2 trains arrived in the station before ours showed up. As a native New Yorker, I was comforted to see that pigeons live in subway stations everywhere. The first train pulls into the station and the doors open. As people enter and exit the train, one pigeon flutters down from the ceiling, lands on the platform and calmly walks onto the train like he's off to work or something. My wife and I laugh about this a little as the doors close and the train pulls away from the station. The second train pulls into the station, the doors open and people shuffle out. After a moment, a different pigeon walks out of this train and then flutters up to the spot vacated by the first one. Anyway, seems like London pigeons have the tube pretty much figured out. I saw a London pigeon wait for the pedestrian crossing to turn green and then cross the road. Waited on the curb. As soon as the little man went green, off he trotted to the other side. Very good road sense, those birds. Worked as a waiter, and after we finished one night, a drunk man was walking down the street. One of my co-workers recognized him and asked if he was the German opera singer doing a show in the city. He answered, "Ja," and asked if we'd like to hear him sing. So he gave us a 3-minute private concert in the middle of the night, drunk off his face. I helped a German guy at CVS jump his car, and to thank me, he gave me a fancy bottle of shampoo. Well, we have 2 German stories, one of a free masterclass performance by an esteemed professional, and one who took up a significant portion of your time and gave you a bottle of shampoo. That country contains multitudes, clearly. While jogging slowly up a steep hill, I got cheered on by the driver of the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. Did he say, "You're not a loser, you're a wiener"? A huge, big ceramic tub flew off a flatbed truck and exploded into a million pieces on the interstate. I'd just pulled out of my office parking lot when a lady hit my rear passenger side with her SUV as she pulled out of a rail station parking lot. Ugh. So we both pulled over at the Taco Cabana to do the typical fender-bender rigmarole, but to my surprise a pickup truck followed behind us. I didn't think too much of it and I got out to exchange info. As I approached her car, I noticed she's avoiding my gaze completely. I'm standing there knocking on her window like, "What the frick, lady?" And then a man gets out of the aforementioned truck. He demands to know what happened and why I hit her, to which I retort, "Excuse me, but who are you?" And she hit me. Are you frickin' joking? Are you blind? I'm growing more livid by the second because I just want to go home. Out of nowhere, her van with a local Mexican restaurant's branding pulls up and another guy gets out and starts yelling at pickup truck man. They seem to know each other. The woman in the SUV now locks her door. I heard her power locks. And I turn back to address the van man and he's arguing with pickup truck man. A security guard from the neighboring rail station is walking over, and as I'm flagging him over for help, van man headbutts pickup truck man. Full on. I'm in total disbelief and now the security guard is frantically running and jumping a hedge of bushes. He comes and breaks up the fight. I'm not sure why, but it was only at this point that I feared for my safety. But I was also now deeply invested in this drama that was unfolding. Turns out the woman who hit me was having an affair with the pickup truck man and they were having a rendezvous at the rail station parking lot. Van man is her husband and he had just caught them in the act. Worst part is their teenage son was with him. Van man is practically giddily telling me to contact him at all if I need a witness to the accident to get my car fixed. Presumably so she can get slammed with a hefty fine or a premium or whatever. So yeah, you just don't see a grown man headbutt another grown man in a Taco Cabana parking lot every day. A bride in her wedding gown running in the train station being chased by 2 women holding the train of her dress. I was driving home one day and as I entered my neighborhood, I saw a turkey in mid-flight about 15 feet in the air glide across the road and face first into the side of a house. It plopped down on the ground and just as quickly hightailed it around the corner and out of sight. An ambulance ran over a pedestrian while on the way back to a medical emergency, so they picked up the pedestrian that they'd just run over and came back to the hospital. Fortunately, both emergencies turned out okay. I once saw a squirrel carrying an entire pomegranate around a cemetery. I saw a dude absolutely bombing a hill on a skateboard, doobie in hand, a crossbow on his back. Not like a little one, like a medieval reenactment crossbow used for storming the gates of Helm's Deep. I once took the Channel from London to Paris, first time ever doing so, or even being in France for that matter. As I was walking through the station, a dude ran up to me and started quacking like a duck. I still wonder how that guy's doing 2 years later. Watched a guy on a quad drop his hat, look back and decide to leave it behind. About 2 minutes later, some guy in a tan car drives up, swerves around it, stops, leans out of the car, picks up the hat, puts it on, and then just drives away like nothing happened. Neutering a dog the other day, he appeared to be a cryptochid, that is, one normal testy, one not descended, retained somewhere in the abdomen. Well, we can still neuter those. In fact, it's even more important to do so, since the retained one can later develop cancer if left behind. So into the abdomen I went, looking for that retained testy, which I was expecting to find somewhere between the kidney and the inguinal ring. I found a uterus instead. It was like looking both ways before crossing the street and then getting hit by a submarine from the sky. At around 3 a.m., I saw a man rollerblading through the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton. I couldn't believe the hotel staff were just letting him get away with this, but no one even attempted to stop him. I ended up getting on the elevator behind him. That man was Jim Carrey. I was walking through my neighborhood with a couple of friends one morning, and a couple of women drove up to us and asked if we'd seen their horse. We were confused and told them no sorry, and they drove away, but literally 30 seconds later a horse runs out of the woods about 10 feet in front of us and runs past us down the street. We were all awestruck. Preface, I live in the Crystal Valley of the Midwest, so this story isn't exactly surprising. I was in Walmart and I saw this older woman, about 65, and she didn't have a shirt or a brassiere on. Instead, she took her very stretchy pants and lifted them up above her very saggy chest, forming a sort of romper jumper thing, and just went on her way. That was not something I expected or wanted to see. My friends and I have a theory that every Walmart in the US has the same people in it. No matter where you are, once you step inside, you're no longer in the same town you were just in. You are now in Walmart. I used to work next door to a mini golf course, and the window of our drive-thru looked out over the golf course. One day I'm working the drive-thru and I look out the window to see 4 people golfing in full fursuits. When I was working nights on security, I saw 2 people getting chased by a rat. I questioned life for a brief moment. Was that the moment you chose to stop taking whatever substances I assume you were downing by the sachet every shift? Honestly, I love this. It reminds me of that Disney trope where like a homeless guy is drinking liquor and then he throws away the bottle they were just drinking because what they've just seen in front of their eyes was so surreal. I worked at a high-functioning casino as a cocktail server a few years back. This lady came up to me and asked if I wanted to see something cool. Me, not knowing what to expect, says, "Sure, why not?" The woman proceeds to pull a purple rag out of her brassiere and begins to unfold it. I start to hear little chirps coming out from the rag. This woman pulled a baby chicken out of her cleave in the middle of a casino and let me pet it. She then folded the rag back up, stuffed the baby chicken back into her chest, and told me not to tell anyone. You better believe I told everyone. Today, I was coming upstairs after eating quesadillas with my family and watching Frasier, and my 90-pound dog suddenly scrambles up the last 3 steps. I saw a flash of fur and I'm like, what the frick? A rabbit in my house? I see there's a strange small dog in my place, and then there's yelping, and then there's another small dog. My big puppy chases the crap out of them in the living room as they dash for the door, yelping with my dog tailing them down the frickin' block. Yeah. Turns out as I was cooking the quesadillas, I opened the back door a little bit to let my dog out to pee and forgot the door was open. So these 2 little scoundrels must have been like, "Hey, it smells good in this house, let's go inside." A coyote puppy came out of the arroyo and followed me and my dog around while we were walking. They didn't become friends or have any wondrous adventures or anything. My friend and I were on the loop around Atlanta in bumper-to-bumper traffic. There was a Dodge dually pulling a flatbed trailer in the lane next to us, and on the other side of him was an S10 Blazer who apparently wanted to get in behind the truck. As soon as the truck was past the Blazer, he started to change lanes. But when he noticed the trailer, he swerved back into his own lane, but he overcorrected.
Then he got that blazer up on two wheels like in a stunt show. I could see the drive shaft spinning. He held it long enough for me to turn to my wife, tap her on the arm and say, "Look at that." She saw it, he set it back down, and just kept driving. I was like, are we in a movie? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Blind dude walking into an ambulance face first. The blind dude was crossing the street. He was hearing impaired as well. Striped cane, you see. The ambulance was stopped halfway through a left turn, blocking the pedestrian path. Blind and deaf dude's cane went right under the ambulance, and he went wham, face first. It was audible. The guy in the ambulance's passenger seat watched the whole thing happen. His face contorted from disbelief to shock, fear, horror, a bit of laughter, concern, and finally relief. Guy was around 30 years old and tall. 6 foot 5 inches tall, like a monster. He had a beautiful McEnroe Garfunkel hair puff. Fun times. Dream Theater opened. In the parking lot of a concert in the 80s, a guy with a big blonde fro stripped down and stimulated adult relations with the windshield of his Chevelle. Then he dismounted and strutted around like a chicken. Then more windshield fun times, then chicken, windshield, chicken, ambulance. Either he has stuff in his system that shouldn't be there, or he's missing stuff that should. Looking out my third-story dorm room window and watching the contents of the 4th floor lounge fly past. I'm afraid that depending on the college or university, that might be a daily occurrence in some dorms. This reminds me of an old story from my college where a student threw a burning mattress out his dorm window. When campus security found him, they asked him why he threw a burning mattress out the window, to which he responded, "Because it was on fire." When we saw a pickup truck pull a boat down a city street, without a trailer. Lots of sparks, though. I still wonder about that. I just shared the longer version of this story earlier today, but to summarize, a person getting arrested while wearing an inmate costume. Our tiny kitten had stolen a slice of pepperoni pizza and was hissing and snarling and fighting off 2 adult dogs and an adult cat. Nobody was getting that slice of pizza from him. Some guy cut me off with a trailer on a road with a speed limit of 35. A few minutes later, I happened to pull into the same gas station as him. I tried my best not to look at him. I don't want to start anything. I hear, "Hey!" I make a beeline for the gas station door. Then I hear a whistle coming from the direction where he was, and I was still trying to ignore him. I finally turn around when he comes jogging up to me. Rough-looking fella. But he says, "I'm sorry for cutting you off back there. I was low on gas." I drive for a living and I come across buttholes daily, so this guy apologizing really threw me off. I said, "No worries," and I thanked him for apologizing and we went our separate way. In short, butthole driver cuts me off and then apologizes to me in public. Trail riding up in a fairly isolated part of north-central Washington state when 3 emus ran out of the trees. The horses were not impressed. These birds lived up there for several years, menacing anyone who came around. Saw a roadrunner and a coyote along the same stretch of highway. Saw a car that instead of paint was covered in short brown fur. Never seen anything like it since. This was probably somebody else's unexpected weird plot twist, but this one was the hottest recorded day in the city. I was walking down a secluded trail, but had to stop at a bench just to cool down. Then this really tall black guy was sitting in a motorized chair with a foot cast. He was really chilled since he was smoking a J and asked if I wanted a lift. So I sat on one of the armrests and away we went. It was a short ride, but he offered me a hit of his doobie and I figured, crap, why not? This is already the most bizarre situation I've ever been in. We passed an old lady and then it hit me like, oh, we're in the most affluent part of a city and a black guy and a brown guy are cruising through the scenic path, smoking a J on a motorized chair. Just your average day in the city. A woman at the 7-Eleven was trying to put hot water on a cup of instant ramen, accidentally put in hot coffee. That just sounds completely normal to the narrator, to be honest. I am certain that there's a 50% chance of me pouring the wrong liquid into the wrong receptacle if I have more than 2 liquids at hand at any given time. For reference, see me drinking my paint water from my brush cleaning cup instead of my tea at any given time that I paint. Found out today that my grandpa was a boy when the historic tornado of 1939 hit Anoka, Minnesota. He was trying to find his brother and was pulled into the armory by a stranger and taken into the basement moments before the roof was blown off.
found his brother in the basement, and was instructed by brother to go straight home. On the way home, he came across a woman who had been beheaded from the tornado. He then saw a man on the ground who had been clutching something. He was too scared to see if he was alive and just ran home. His other brother was in a movie theater, and it somehow didn't lose power or anything during the tornado. The movie just kept playing, so the older brother left the movie theater clueless to the tornado to see basically the entire town destroyed. I walked into my backyard and I found a chicken. The strange part was that my backyard was completely fenced off with no gaps that a chicken could have snuck through. So where did this chicken come from and how did it get into my backyard? Well, I got the latter answer when I spooked it. It ran towards the chain-link fence at the rear of the yard, grabbed a link with its beak and proceeded to pull itself up. It locked in first one foot, then the other, then raised its beak to repeat the process until it had scaled the fence completely and hopped down, wings blasting to slow its descent. That thing was a fast climber. The squirrels should have taken notes. As for the former answer, it turns out my neighbor was raising chickens and this one ran away when coyotes raided her coop. Once, in high school, I went into the bathroom to see a kid crying outside a stall that had a massive 8-inch long, black as the night, peanut-spiked turd bobbing in the toilet. I still feel bad for that kid. I watched a horse kill a rattlesnake once, alternated between stomping it with hooves and picking it up to whip it around with its mouth. A few years ago, while visiting family in the south of Spain, I'm from the States, I was out at a bar with my cousin. His girlfriend's family owned the bar, and it was small but packed. I went upstairs to the only bathroom to go pee, opened the unlocked door and walked in on a full 3-person whoopee party in full swing. Butts and bits and everything. Immediately tried to cover my eyes while backing out the door and yelling, "Lo siento! Lo siento!" My cousin, his girlfriend, and her mum ran up and promptly removed them, but I had zero desire to touch anything in the bathroom after that. This was also the first time I ever tried absinthe, and skinny dipped in the Mediterranean for the first time. It was a solid night. This literally happened today. My husband and I were at a stop sign, and a guy comes out of nowhere on a bicycle holding a weed whacker, and there was a huge rabbit in the hood of his coat. Once saw a man proceed to scratch his butt crack inside of his pants, smell his hand, and then eat a sandwich in the same hand on public transportation. That was certainly interesting. One of the stories from the old-timers while doing my plumbing apprenticeship in a factory was about a toilet filled to the top with a number 2. The lead plumber told the old-timer, who was an apprentice at the time, to pull out the number 2. The apprentice said, "No way." The lead plumber then proceeded to scoop out a bare handful, squeeze it where the poop was oozing between his fingers, and then threw it against a wall. He did this until he cleaned the toilet. Then he washed his hands with cold water and then ate a sandwich. I have a farm. I have ducks on one side and pigs on the other. One of my male ducks was awfully willful towards the females, so we put him over with the pet pigs. He could easily leave if he wanted, but he chose to stay. He can be seen laying on top of his beloved potbelly friend, nibbling his ear and making sweet love, while my poor potbelly piggy boy just lays on his side in the sun without a care in the world. I work security on the side. I feel I can give you a different answer every so often. Watched a guy the other day going through boxes of men's shoes and sniffing them, looking for the ones with a foot scent. When he found them, he'd get a little fidgety. Went to the back of the department with a few boxes and was looking around heavily. But there was a family and a bunch of kids around and he left abruptly. No joke, the way he was acting and how he was, positioning things, that guy was about to do the deed with a pair of Nikes. It was some wild crap. Watched another guy one time bust out of the store with about 1,300 in clothes and right into the side of his getaway vehicle, which then ran him the F over. I'm not ashamed to say I laughed my butt off. He lived. People pooping, peeing, whacking the mule, attacking innocent bystanders, robberies, a marriage proposal from a smacked-out junkie, and just so many accidents. You see so much stuff in this job, man. Man, security people have the best stories. My favorite one that kind of relates to you and your snatch and run guy was the guy who picked up a giant flat-screen TV and ran out the door and down the street with it. About 2 minutes later, all you see is him and the TV go flying through a plate glass window back into the store he stole it from. We had to watch the cameras like 5 times before we spotted the tiny 5'2" blonde loss prevention chick do her flying tackle, which is what sent him through that window. The best part was that after he was arrested, he had a chat with the police, and he suddenly burst into tears. Apparently he thought that if they charged him with the theft of it, it was like he'd pay for it. He was determined when he said that they needed to be gentle while loading his TV into the cruiser's trunk. Like the flight through a window was so great for it in the first place. They had to inform him that no, he couldn't keep the TV, and he bawled all the way to the police car. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.